Ladies and gents, boys and girls, happy Friday, July the 28th, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host, the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. We have got a jam-packed show for you here on this Friday. I see John Edward, Alex Mitchum, Travi as well. Also those in the Big Cock Club Discord. Head over to the TDC Questions channel. The TDC Questions channel. Be sure your questions are answered there as well. I see Brendan M. also. Again, guys, a lot to get into. Very excited to chat with you all here on this Friday. In our third hour, of course, we will have our Q&A power hour, taking your questions, your comments, your calls at 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. If you cannot call in, by the way, in that third hour, you are welcome to leave us a voicemail in the meantime, and we will play that voicemail in our third hour. You can also text that number as well. And hour number two, really excited, Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. He will join us. He was actually at ACC Media Days yesterday, covering all things Clemson Tigers. But, of course, we were not able to talk to Mark last week due to the internet issues at the Airbnb, what have you. So really excited to hear from Mark Ryan, his thoughts on SEC Media Days, the Gamecocks specifically, and who knows, we might even talk a little ACC Media Days and kind of get a scouting report, if you will, on the arch rival on this Friday as well. And, of course, guys, in hour number one, we continue on with our position unit preview series as we wrap up talking about the Gamecocks running backs entering the 2023 season. We'll talk what will define a successful season for the ball carriers, as well as give an overall grade to the unit. Brace yourselves, folks. It's coming. Also, of course, our opponent preview series. We are winding down on that today. We've got the Vanderbilt Commodores, my good friend Billy Derrick of VandySports.com, formerly of the Door Report. He just got the promotion to VandySports.com. He joined the show to talk all things Vanderbilt football and, of course, that matchup in Week 11 between the Gamecocks and the Commodores. Really good stuff, guys. Again, jam-packed show. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much for the continued love and support. I hope the show does find you well, no matter where you are, what you're doing. And again, I hope you're having a fantastic start to your weekend. Again, I cannot say thank you enough. This week has been absolutely electric. I feel right now, guys, as if content has never operated. This business, everything we're doing has never operated at a higher level than it is right now, from content to merch to everything we are doing, everything, everything in between. Things are rolling. And again, I cannot say thank you enough. Of course, guys, the opponent preview series wraps up on Monday and Tuesday. Monday, we'll talk Kentucky. And then, yes, on Tuesday, we will talk the Clemson Tigers. I'm not exactly sure who we're going to have or what guest we will have on for that, but it is going to be a lot of fun as we wrap that up. And, of course, guys, going into next week, we've got fall camp. We'll have a full fall camp preview and a lot of content around that. Our position unit preview series is going to roll on through the next 3 or 4 weeks or so. And, again, content bleeding out the eyeballs. Y'all already know the drill. Guys, that being said, let's go ahead and kick it off, guys. Again, we had Billy Derrick of VandySports.com. We've done a lot of work with Billy over the years, doing different shows, appearances, stuff like that. Really appreciate him taking the times and learning about Clark Lee's program as they go into year 3 of his tenure. So, guys, sit back, relax, enjoy this convo with Billy Derrick of VandySports.com. As our 2023 opponent preview series continues, we head to Nashville, Tennessee to talk the Vanderbilt Commodores, and who better to help us break down all things Vandy than Billy Derrick, formerly of the Door Report and now of VandySports.com. Billy, first things first, was great to meet you in Nashville at SEC Media Days, and congratulations on the promotion, my friend. What's going on?
I appreciate it, Chris. It was a blast to be with you at SEC Media Days. I feel like it was nice to have a guy like you to, anytime, I don't know if I got bored, but anytime, hey, I'm going to go have some fun. I'm going to go say what's up to Chris and just kind of talk shop and talk ball, man. It was a blast to meet you and so many other people. SEC Mike. I mean, I can't even name all the people I got to meet. And so, and we talked about that. It's a great opportunity for young aspiring content creators to just go and chop it up with whoever, and most people there are nice enough to give you some of their time. So yeah, I mean, it was a blast, and it was great to see you there. I know it was your first SEC Media Days, so covering the Gamecocks, and it's a content machine. It's kind of crazy what Media Days has turned into.
Billy, before we go any further, I got to put you on the spot. Were you one of the 8 that voted for Vanderbilt to win the SEC East?
I was not. You're about the 8th person to ask me that. Palmer Toms, who covers Georgia, asked me that. No, I was not.
Do
And
you
honestly,
have an idea of who those 8 people are?
I don't even know. I was wondering that the other day, and my I worked for George Plaster here in Nashville. He was asked if he was one of them. And my guess would be somebody there that was credentialed and wanted to make a joke and wanted to, hey, tell some of their friends back home that, yeah, I was the one. And I think somebody came out on Twitter and said, here's why I picked Vandy. And I think that person, I forget his name, but I think he went on with Paul Feinbaum and explained himself. So, Chris, and I went on a rant about this. I said, that's a joke. That's ridiculous that Vanderbilt got 5 votes to win the SEC. I mean, that's a joke. And I cover Vanderbilt. I've grown up in Nashville, and I've been in Nashville my whole life. And I obviously tend to favor Vanderbilt in respects, but I mean, that's ridiculous. Like that's a joke. Tennessee had 5 as well, which isn't a joke, but the fact that Vanderbilt had the same is ridiculous. So, I know we were both credentialed. We weren't the ones that did that, but at the same time, there were 5 people that picked Vanderbilt to win the conference. And I think, what was it, 8 that picked Vanderbilt to win the East? So I mean, that's a joke, Chris. I mean, both of us can agree on that. But no, I fortunately was not the one that made that mistake.
South Carolina got 1 vote to win the SEC, and I'd love to bring that guy on my show and just hear him out. Honestly, I really would. I really would love to hear the explanation. Either way, let's talk Vanderbilt football on the field this season, Billy. Before we look at this season, though, let's quickly glance back at 2022. 5-7, 2-6 in year 2 of Clark Lee, but a year in which you close out strong, beating Kentucky and Florida late in the season. Just talk about the year that was, because Vanderbilt obviously overachieved the expectations early on. I mean, you start early on, with those big wins against Hawaii, Elon, beat Northern Illinois, but then a long stretch in the middle. With those wins late in the season against Kentucky and Florida, I feel like they show a lot of promise for the future for Clark Lee's program.
It's funny you asked about last season, and I got to talk to Clark Lee about staring down a 3-9 season. That's what he told me. That was a direct quote from Clark Lee after that South Carolina loss, right? I know we previewed that game, and ahead of that game, we were both kind of I don't know either way where this game's going to go. But Chris, that South Carolina loss at home ended up being somewhat of a turning point. Clark Lee was hammered with questions about Dan Jackson, his one of his secondary coaches, about a fiasco with him with a Facebook comment, and it got all political. So he was hammered with questions after that game, not just about the game, but about an issue prior to that game. And so you could tell it had potentially started to weigh on Clark and his coaching staff. They had a bye week after South Carolina, and they figured some things out, Chris. They went on the road to Lexington and beat a top 25 Kentucky team, right, with obviously a banged-up Will Levis and a weak offensive line. But that Kentucky, I mean, Mark Stoops has done a hell of a job up there. So to go up there and beat Kentucky was impressive. But, Chris, not only that, they turned around and beat Florida, a team that obviously had fallen on hard times down the stretch of the season. But to go back-to-back weeks beating 2 of – I mean, let's face it, top half teams, I think, at least talent-wise in the SEC, right? Kentucky's a team with a running back in Chris Rodriguez, talented receivers. Levis, I know he was banged up. But Florida's Florida, right? Anytime you beat Florida, whether it's home or on the road.
And Billy, to your point, a Florida team that had just dismantled South Carolina 38-6. I mean, they were coming off of a high going into Nashville, and Vandy did not care.
And that's why I was so surprised about that result, right? I was surprised by the Kentucky result. But the Florida result was like, what in the world is happening? I mean, I was there like, how is this happening? First time Vandy beat Florida at home since 1988. I don't even know who the president was. We weren't even a thought, Chris. I mean, so they made history last year with that Florida game. But then, of course, they turn around and get boat raced by Tennessee. And we talked about this at SEC Media Days, and we kind of joked about it. No matter who Tennessee played after that South Carolina game, they were going to dismantle them. I mean, and I was glad you said that, because I was glad I wasn't the only one that thought that. And I mean that's kind of how a football season goes, Chris. Right? It goes ebbs and flows. It's hard to string together, several wins in the SEC. It just is, and South Carolina knows that well. Like last year, that Florida game was it was confusing as ever. But then they turn around and pick off Tennessee and Clemson. So yeah, for this Vanderbilt team, Chris, that to beat two SEC teams if you're Clark Lee in your second year is massive. It just is. It's massive after what happened in Mason's last 2 years to turn around and kind of accelerate the build. I mean, like I said, he was staring down. He told me this. He was staring down a 3-9 season, and he was not going to live with that. He just wasn't. So I think they kept grinding, and they stayed on the attack, and that's the culture, Chris. I mean, I think that their culture won those two games, and you look at Florida and Kentucky's cultures, that might have lost them those two games, right? They kind of fell apart down the stretch, and I don't think you're going to see this Clark Lee program fall apart many times down the stretch of the season. So I think you have to point to the culture. But year three, now you got some expectations. So that's where you turn your attention.
And Billy, you sort of just touched on it. I wanted you to speak on Clark Lee going into his third year and just the overall vibe around him from the Vanderbilt fan base. I mean, listen, I heard him at SEC Media Days, and I loved everything Clark Lee had to say. I think he's a perfect fit for Vandy. It's a tough job, obviously, with challenges. We know that. But I just love the fact that he speaks saying that, 5-7 is not the standard. We want to be the best program in college football. And, some people will scoff and snicker, but that's how I want my leader to talk. I will go into battle for that guy. So speaking on that culture that you mentioned, again, the overall vibe around Clark Lee going into his third season, what's the mood around the Commodores head coach from the fan base?
It's positive. I mean, the fans haven't had a coach like this to rally around since James Franklin. Now, and I know Mason beat Tennessee 3 times in a row, but Tennessee was really down, and they really never could totally rally around Coach Mason. I know he did a good job kind of the middle stretch of his tenure here, but he after that Tennessee win in 2016, they turned around and lost in the bowl game. He didn't win a bowl game while he was at Vanderbilt. So this, Chris. He's a Nashville guy. He has built Vanderbilt to this point in his image and what he wants it to be and what he has always wanted a program to be when he's the head coach, right? Not to mention bringing in Barton Simmons. I thought it was interesting. Clark talked a lot about the recruiting approach from their staff. He talked about traits and measurables and, basically admitting that we're not going to attract the 4- and 5-star kids that everyone else is at this point in time. That's just we're not there yet as a program. So they're looking for traits, measurables that NFL players have, and they're going to see how many NFL players they can develop within the next 2-3 years. So that's the approach they have attracted, and they've attracted some recruits. I think their 2024 class is a top 30, top 35 class right now, which is impressive. I mean, at Vandy, right? That's rare. So, but yeah, you talk about the culture and some of his comments, Chris. When you think about Clark Lee, he's not sexy, right? He's not he's not a Shane Beamer type of guy. He's not a Josh Heupel where he's going to stand up there and just have that bold swagger. He's gonna kind of kill you with his philosophical approach, right? He's a Vanderbilt graduate. I told this to Chris Lee when we were recording our first podcast together. I said, Chris, I learned something every time I listen to Clark Lee talk, whether it's a presser or at media days. And, players like that, right? Fans like that in a coach where, he's not just up there spewing bull crap. And coaches have done that before, right? I think we've seen coaches at SEC media days, not to knock Lane Kiffin, but, I think most fan bases would rather have a coach like a Clark Lee or even a Shane Beamer where they're up there and I love what this guy's saying, as opposed to, you spend your whole session if they're talking about NIL. Now, again, nothing against Lane Kiffin. I agree with a lot of what he said, but as a fan base, you probably want your coach to tell you about your team, tell you about the progress, the culture, the recruiting, all kinds of different stuff. So yeah, Chris, I agree with everything you said. But for Clark Lee, he realizes the challenge, right? He knows what he's in for, and that's why he came to Vanderbilt for the challenge. And it's year 3 is huge, man. I mean, I think we talked about this, Chris. And Shane Beamer has noticed this as well. When you create expectations for your program, that's when it gets 5-10 times harder for you as a staff, for the players, for everybody. So year 3, it's going to keep getting harder every year. and they start out this season similar to the way they did last year against Hawaii, but they get the Rainbow Warriors at home. So Clark Lee is already beloved with this fan base. Now there's the outliers that they'll argue with everything that he says, and but every fan base has that. But at the end of the day, Chris, he's got this train moving in the right direction. And I think if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you got to be excited.
Now, Billy, on the offensive side of the football going in the 2023 season, A.J. Swann returns as your QB1. You do lose Ray Davis at the transfer portal. He obviously went to Kentucky. Cedric Alexander and Chase Gillespie will look to fill that void in the backfield. Will Sheppard leads the receiving corps, I think probably one of the most underrated players in the SEC simply because he's at Vanderbilt. You got 3 of 5 on the back on the offensive line. You're returning over 70 career starts, so there's some experience up front. And it's not necessarily an explosive group, at least it wasn't last year, but pretty fundamentally sound. Not a group that really shoots themselves in the foot or makes mental errors or, fundamental mistakes, if you will. So when you look at this Vanderbilt offense, what do you see? What do you expect the Commodores to be offensively this season?
That's the question of the offseason, Chris. I mean, that's what every Vanderbilt fan is excited to see. Now, the good thing for this offense is that you start out with some cupcakes, like most teams, right? I mean, you start out, other than South Carolina, of course. But Hawaii, Alabama A&M, Wake Forest, and UNLV, right? I mean, that's as manageable of a 4-game non-conference slate for a young sophomore quarterback that you can ask for. Now, it gets tougher, but even the first 2 SEC games, Chris, Kentucky and Missouri at home, I mean, that's I saw an article. Somebody wrote something that Vanderbilt's going to start 6-1. Here's why on the season. Now, that's a little bit of a stretch, but Chris, I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. So, but yeah, this offense, A.J. Swann's a sophomore, right? He had flashes last season where you go, this kid's got some talent, right? He's got an absolute cannon. He's athletic, but he's not a guy that's going to outrun any defense. But he's got to stay healthy, Chris. I mean, every quarterback struggles with that in the SEC, other than maybe Alabama and Georgia. But I mean, that's the big question every year. But he struggled with some head injuries last year. I think there were 2 separate hits where I think in that South Carolina game, that's when he went down with that concussion. And South Carolina, one of the better pass rushes last year. You can't have that, right? You have to find a way, if you're Vanderbilt and that offensive coaching staff, to protect him, give him 1 or 2 more seconds, right? I mean, like that's what it comes down to a lot. So Swann, there's high expectations and there's pressure, but they like him a lot, Chris. That's why, I mean, that's part of the reason Mike Wright left, right? I mean, you got to believe that coaching staff said it straight to Mike Wright, like, listen, A.J. Swann is our guy. If you want to stay here and be the backup, you can. But at the end of the day, Swann is our guy. We wish you well. Obviously, he went to Mississippi State, but you go to that receiving core. Will Sheppard, I think, is one of the more slept-on players in the SEC. I mean, he's a legit candidate to lead the conference in receiving, I think. Quincy Skinner is a guy that showed flashes. He scored that touchdown against South Carolina last year, sort of out of nowhere down the sideline. Great pass by Swann. Jade McGowan, though, is a guy I watch for. He's a sophomore speed demon. I mean, he showed up last year in the Ole Miss game. It was a quick little screen pass from A.J. Swann, and McGowan took it to the house. And it's like there were plays like that, Chris, from these young players, Swann, McGowan, Skinner, where you go, okay, they might have something down the road. But it all depends on the offensive line. They like their offensive line. You mentioned 3 of 5 starters back. That's always a good thing, right? No matter how good your offensive line was. You've got continuity there, so that's good. But at the end of the day, Chris, the biggest question, and I said this in our podcast with Danny Sports yesterday, the bottom line with this season is how do they protect A.J. Swann? And if he stays healthy the entire season and Vanderbilt makes a bowl game, more power, right? I mean, but that is so rare, especially for a sophomore quarterback. He's talented, but he's inexperienced still, right? And so I just think if you're Vanderbilt, you've got to do everything you can to keep him healthy. But for AJ, he's also going to find some consistency, right? And at last year, he showed the flashes, but he also had some weak moments, like every freshman quarterback. So, Chris, he's a sophomore, but again, this coaching staff is confident in him, and they're going to give him every opportunity. But they've also got a backup right behind him in Ken Seals that they also like. He's been there forever, and he knows the offense. So I think cautiously optimistic, right? You mentioned the running back. Cedric Alexander is a guy who's a freshman, looked great in fall camp. They've got a couple other veterans behind him. That's another question. So there's some questions to be answered, but there's enough proven depth there that I think this offense can do some things.
Now, switching sides of the football, Billy, the defensive side, you get a big boost off the edge as Miles Capers returns after suffering a season-ending injury in preseason camp last year. Yawan Otawara, I don't know if I butchered that name, but I'm trying.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
tough one.
I think, what is it? It's Otaha, I think. And then I think the first name somehow is pronounced Isa. I don't know how, but it is.
Okay, well, anyways, you got a pair of good ones manning the interior defensive line, he and Devin Lee as well. CJ Taylor, a guy that's been talked about a lot in the preseason, looks to be a nice piece in the middle. Who replaces Anferni Orji in the middle of that defense? That is a huge question for Vandy. BJ Anderson, Jalen Mahoney, and Ricky Wright all return in the secondary. And it's a secondary, though, a lot of room for improvement, allowed 8.7 yards per pass attempt last season, which was at the bottom of college football. So what are you expecting? Of course, Clark Lee is a defensive-minded guy. What are we expecting from the Commodores' defense in 2023?
Well, I mean, improvement, but how much, right? I think that's the question. In terms of the front seven, I think they'll be improved. You mentioned Miles Capers. He'll be back. They picked up a guy in Aeneas DeCosmo from Stanford who they like. But I think the middle of the defense is the strength. The linebacker core with Kane Patterson, a transfer from Clemson, Prince Colley, who just came in, a transfer from Notre Dame, Ethan Barr, a guy who's been there forever. And I actually just tweeted about their linebacker group, Chris. I think that could be one of the more slept-on groups in the SEC, just because of the proven depth, right? You've had guys, even though you lost Anthony Orji, you had guys that have played there. And Clark Lee, he was the linebackers coach at Notre Dame. So it's kind of like the Josh Heupel effect at quarterback, right? No matter who Clark Lee has at linebacker, they're going to be strong at that position group. And then you go to the back end, Chris. They like what they have at safety and Jalen Mahoney and Ricky Wright, but at the cornerback position, and we saw it was on display in that South Carolina game. I've told a lot of people this. That's when I realized I was at that game, and that's when I realized, man, South Carolina is just destroying Vanderbilt on the boundaries. That's what they did. Shane Beamer and the offensive staff said, hey, we're going to look at Vanderbilt's weakness. What's their weakness? They said the boundary, right? The cornerback position, slot corner. We're going to throw. I mean, I can't tell you how many bubble screens, South Carolina was able to throw. Credit to them, right? That's Vanderbilt's Achilles heel. So I think they can alleviate that, Chris, but what difference does that make? Right? How fast can you get in a year? So there's only, I think, to a degree, there's only so much you can do right now just because of you're so devoid of talent and experience. I guess you've got a little bit more experience. But Chris, at the bottom line, Vanderbilt has typically been pretty weak at corner. But I like some of the young guys they've got. And they're going to have to rely on some of those young guys. Martell Height, a freshman coming in. They like Trudell Berry, a sophomore. So I think for Clark Lee, you're probably 2 years away from having corners that you're excited about. Right now, they've got those young guys in place, but they haven't played. Right, they haven't been on the field. So, and this is a problem that most college football programs have nowadays because of the high, passing rates. I mean, everybody's throwing the ball the majority of the time now. Right, there's really no more power running teams left in college football and even in the NFL. So, this is an issue for everybody, but because Vanderbilt is so devoid of talent at that position, it's tough. So. Again, they like their safety position, but the cornerback position remains a weakness. And I think they'll be improved on the front seven. But a big key this year, Chris, on the defense is going to be how much pressure can they get on the quarterback. And I think you actually asked this to Clark Lee in his press conference, and I thought it was one of the better questions that was asked. And Clark Lee answered it and said, "Yeah, we have to get pressure with four, right? We can't let's say there's a play you only get 2 or 3 guys that get to the quarterback." You're screwed on the outside. And Clark Lee knows that. He's a defensive guru. So he knows they've got to get pressure with 4 if they can. That makes the job a little bit easier on the corners, as you know. So the corner, a lot of last season, Chris, the weakness at corner was a lot due in large part to the lack of pressure and the lack of attention on the quarterback. So again, there's a lot of pressure on the front seven, but there's even more pressure on the cornerbacks. And that, to me, is another big question this year.
Talking Vanderbilt football with Billy Derrick of VandySports.com. Let's move to the special teams. Matthew Hayball back at punter, 45.4 yards per punt last season. One of the better punters in college football. There's a battle at kicker taking place between Brock Taylor and Will Ferris, and you get McGowan and Shepard back to man the return game. Anything, Billy, stand out in regards to Commodore's special teams going into this season?
Yeah, Matthew Hayball. I don't know if you've seen him at all, Chris, but I mean, And again, I know I've made some bold statements today, but I think he's one of the best in the country. And I've like people have told me that on the Vanderbilt staff and other people that cover Vanderbilt. They've said, you know, like in practice, and I've seen him punt in practice and in games, and it's pretty crazy. Like the directional style, he's a modern age punter with some of the directional punts he can do. So he's the strength of special teams. I mean, he's a weapon last year. I think I don't know if you get credit as a punter for a muffed punt, but I mean their special teams unit did calls that muffed punt in the Florida game that ended up Vanderbilt scored a touchdown on and proved to be huge. So Justin Lustig is one of the better, I think, special teams coordinators in the SEC. He came from Syracuse. He was always ranked high in that category up in the ACC. And you look this year, the weakness in the special teams is the kicking position, like you said, right? You lose Joseph Bulovis, who was inconsistent last year, but he was a guy that at least you could rely on for the shorter field goals. This year, it's a three-way battle, at least it looks like to me. Will Ferris, I think a walk-on that has been in the program for a while. They got a transfer from Kansas who was banged up last year, Jacob Borsilla, who, of course, I mean, came from a decent Kansas program, went to a bowl game last year. And then the freshman Brock Taylor, like you mentioned, from Knoxville. They stole away from Knox Catholic out there on the east side of Tennessee. So, you know, I think they like what they've got there. But again, like many positions at Vanderbilt, they're just inexperienced, right? You haven't seen them do it on the field. So, but yeah, return game, I think they like what they've got there. Will Shepard has been the punt returner, receiver, sure-handed guy. I don't think he really struggled last year. And then Jay McGowan on the kickoff. So I talked about him in the receiving room. So, you know, I think they like what they've got. They've got a really good coordinator in Justin Lustig, who's also the tight ends coach. So, you know, it's similar to the Beamer Ball effect, Chris. Like when you've got a unit like that you can really rely on and honestly win you some games. Like I think that special teams unit should be given credit for that Florida game, right? I mean, I don't know. It might have just been like Florida just screwed that up. Like they just muffed the punt. But again, you got to give some credit, right? I mean, you caused them a muff punt and you ended up scoring a touchdown on it. So I think, and you know this well with the Beamer Ball special team stuff, like when you can do that with your special teams unit, it's such a weapon. And I think Vanderbilt can with their punter, kicker. I think the hope for this staff is that the kicking game doesn't cost them any games, right? Down the stretch, you know, you need a field goal to win it. Do you have confidence in that guy? They don't know. I don't think they know who the guy will be. My gut will tell me Jacob Borsilla from Kansas. He kicked decently well when he was in the game last year for Kansas. And then maybe down the stretch, Brock Taylor's a guy that comes in and proves himself. But yeah, there's not as many questions with special teams heading into the season, which I think is good for Vanderbilt.
So you look at the overall outlook, Billy, for Vanderbilt. 10 starters are back on this team, 6 on the offensive side, 4 on the defensive side. My question, Billy, is this. Can Vanderbilt make a bowl game in year 3 of Clark Lee? When you take a look at that 2023 schedule, the way it sets up, you mentioned the beginning, Hawaii at home, Alabama A&M, at Wake Forest, at UNLV out the gate, that being in the month of September, those first couple of games. And, of course, we know Vandy opens up week 0 against the Rainbow Warriors. So a very friendly start to the schedule in the non-conference. You then jump into SEC play. You've got Kentucky, Mizzou, at Florida, Georgia. You get your bye week. Then you go to Ole Miss, Auburn, at South Carolina, really late in the season. Another bye week, and then at Tennessee to close out the season. So how do you feel the 2023 schedule shakes out for Vandy, and what are the expectations for the Commodores in year 3 of Clark Lee?
Well, first off, I don't think Clark is happy about playing in week 0. I think he'll be ready to get out of the Mason scheduling idea there of playing week 0. I don't know why anyone would really want to play in week 0. I mean, you start camp earlier. It's now I think you're playing Hawaii, so again, it probably won't matter. But season starts earlier. You know, you got to start fall camp earlier. We were just talking about that before we got on. Vanderbilt starts Wednesday, and South Carolina starts, I think, next Friday. So you know, that's a big difference. So you got to get after it a little bit quicker, get used to, you know, the offensive installs. But in terms of the rest of the schedule, I said this earlier, the first 4 games are about as manageable as you could ask for, especially for a young quarterback in A.J. Swan. At Wake Forest, to me, Chris, for that first half of the season is massive, right? If you can go up to Winston-Salem and beat Wake Forest, a proven program, good program, right? I mean, no Sam Hartman, though, no A.T. Perry. So if you're Vanderbilt, you can go up there. That's a 10 a.m. kickoff. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a 10 a.m. kickoff.
Really?
Up there. Yeah, I'm actually going to try to get up there. So I got to leave Friday, I guess. So, but yeah, so first half, I think it's manageable, Chris. Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida are 3 huge games, toss-up games, I think most people would say, right in the middle of the schedule. Georgia and Ole Miss, obviously tough. And then South Carolina, obviously tough. But Auburn is sandwiched in between those. So that Auburn game, like the two biggest games for me, Chris, at Wake Forest, September the 9th, and then Auburn at home, homecoming, I think family day. They've got a lot going on. November the 4th. So that, to me, those two games, Wake and Auburn, are the games, if you're Vanderbilt, I don't think you can let slip away. But if you do, you've still got Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida, right? I think 3 more toss-up games that you can try to pick off. So, again, I think it sets up well, right? I think, and you ask, can they make a bowl game? Yes, I think they can. But if they don't, I don't think that means they didn't improve, right? And I know, we could look back at this season, and if they go 5-7, you look back at that 3 years from now and say, okay, yeah, they didn't improve in the win column, but they looked different on the field. And if they would have made one more play, they might have made a bowl game. So it depends on how it happens, right? I mean, you could go 6-6, get lucky for a couple of games, and people would say, oh, that's a fluky bowl appearance, but then go win your bowl. So there's a lot. I say there's a lot riding on the season. I say that tongue in cheek, but in terms of the recruiting acceleration, right? You can really accelerate recruiting, especially in the mid-state, especially in the South, if you find a way to get to a bowl game. They've said, this Vanderbilt coaching staff has said they've got their eyes set on postseason play. And I think that's important, right? To have your coaching staff preaching that all season, all preseason. We've got our eyes set on postseason play. That's huge. I think they can do it. Will they? I don't know, but they certainly can, Chris.
Now, Billy, looking specifically at the game against South Carolina, I'll ask you this. 14 straight losses to the Gamecocks. What is the outlook of Vanderbilt fans and those who follow the program, cover the program? What's the outlook around this game? Because it feels like South Carolina, it doesn't matter how good South Carolina is, bad South Carolina is, in between, the Gamecocks find a way to beat Vandy. Let me ask you this. Do Vandy folks see a light at the end of the tunnel? Do they feel like snapping the streak is potentially near?
That's hard to say yes to that, Chris. It's just Vanderbilt fans hate this matchup. They just do. And, there's every fan base has a matchup that they can't stand playing that team, whether it's the coach, their playing style, Beamer ball, whatever. But it just is what it is. Like, Vanderbilt fans cannot stand that matchup every year. I mean, I think a big part of it was 2 years ago. You lost to was he equipment manager? I mean, what was he even doing?
He was a graduate assistant, Zeb Nolan. Yes.
I mean, like that's the definition of the South Carolina Vanderbilt rivalry. You had a graduate assistant step in and beat you and marched down the field. Like that, and quite frankly, not a very good South Carolina team and not a very good Vanderbilt team either. But it is what it is. Now, I do. It's on the road, and I think if I had to say something, this Clark Lee program has fared better on the road. I think they like that chip on their shoulder. The crowd, I think a lot of teams played better on the road, especially if you're Vanderbilt. You don't have an imposing presence at home. So I think they like playing on the road. But Chris, I'll believe it when I see it, man. 2008 was the last time, and I don't even really remember that win. I think that's the last year Vanderbilt beat Kentucky, or South Carolina. So, but yeah, again, it's not there. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm not. Like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not convinced Vanderbilt will beat South Carolina.
Yeah, Billy, it's funny. I warn Gamecock fans every single year, coming into every single season. I say, folks, South Carolina is going to lose to Vandy at some point. Not everything lasts forever, but I tell you this, I will not be the one who is bold enough to pick it in the preseason until it happens, to your point. So anyways, Billy Derrick, VandySports.com. Billy, appreciate you taking the time. Let everyone know where specifically they can check out all your work.
Yeah, appreciate it, Chris. It's always fun, man. And again, it was great to see you here in Nashville, in my hometown at SEC Media Days. But yeah, on Twitter at Billy Derrick 10, and then Facebook, Instagram too. But I don't put a ton of content out there. YouTube, search VandySports.com. We've got a ton of content rolling out. We had a fall camp preview yesterday. We've got a lot of recruiting stuff that I think Vanderbilt fans will like. And like you, Chris, we'll do game previews every week. So when the South Carolina game comes, I'll be having you on. So I think it's an avenue for South Carolina fans to also come on when Vanderbilt plays South Carolina and learn about the opponent and also have some fun, man. So again, it's always fun to chop it up. Billy Derrick 10 on Twitter. and follow VandySports.com. Again, I don't think there's any Vandy fans that are also South Carolina fans, but you never know, man. You never know. So to Vanderbilt fans listening, subscribe VandySports.com, and I'm trying to be like you, Chris. I'm trying to put out as much content as possible, man. And again, I appreciate for the opportunity.
Billy, I appreciate you, man. Looking forward to chatting with you during the season.
Let's do it, brother.
Okay, that was Billy Derrick of VandySports.com. Guys, be sure to check out his work. Really appreciate Billy taking the time. Always a pleasure to chat with him. He did a great job breaking down all things Vanderbilt football. We're going to jump into a quick break, guys. On the other side, though, we're going to finish up talking Gamecocks running backs heading into the 2023 football season. All that and more on the other side of the break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Friday, July the 28th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. And again, let me say thank you to Billy Derrick of VandySports.com for taking the time to talk all things Vanderbilt football heading into the 2023 football season. Again, guys, hope you're having a fantastic start to your weekend, as there are just 5 Saturdays remaining until Gamecocks kickoff, and just 4 Saturdays remain until SEC football returns, when Vanderbilt takes on the Rainbow Warriors of Hawaii in Nashville, Tennessee. Guys, again, thank you all so much. Be sure to check out, by the way, side note, tsus.store, thespursupshow.com. All of our latest releases, new merchandise rolling out, guys. We're getting hats in stock next week as well. You see the Clem Suck shirt. You can get this, Beamer Ball. All of our other merchandise can be found there. tsus.store, thespursupshow.com. The orders are starting to be delivered from the initial wave now, and it looks like people are really, really excited about the new branding, the new packaging, everything we've done to really enhance and revamp the customer experience. So again, guys, go check it out. tsus.store or thespursupshow.com is where you can find all of our merchandise. Guys, that being said, we started talking running backs yesterday. Let's keep that conversation rolling as we wrap it up on today's show. What will define success for the Gamecocks running backs this upcoming season? And I think when you have this conversation, it's very important to go into this season with realistic expectations for this group. And we'll talk more in depth when I lock in my overall grade here shortly. But when you're talking about the Gamecocks ball carriers and what you're working with, I think there are some things, there are some milestones. You know, for example, if you go into this season expecting someone to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark, or this room as a whole to eclipse 1,500 or 2,000 yards, I think you might be setting yourself up for some heartache. However, I think there are some things that, if achieved, will spell success for this group. And the first one is simply this: a leader emerges among the group. Does it have to be specifically a true RB1 where they get 70% of the carries this fall? Not necessarily. But as I've talked about before, guys, when it's 3rd and 1, it's 4th and 1, it's late in the ball game, who are you handing the ball off to? Is it Dakereon Joyner? Is it DJ Braswell? Is it Mario Anderson? Is it Juju McDowell? And this is something, right, that the coaches only have so much control over. Somebody in that room has to step up. Somebody in that room has to emerge as the dude. And while there may not be a true SEC caliber RB1 on this roster, who's going to be the leader of the group? I think all signs obviously point to Dakereon Joyner, because not just, obviously has never played the running back position full time, but he's a leader on the football team. He's a guy that's made plays for you. He is as respected as any in that locker room. And so I think it's a very natural fit for Dakereon Joyner to step in there and be a leader, both on field and off field. I'm not saying you need an RB1 that's going to take every single carry this season, but what you do need is a leader in that running back room for when you get late in ball games, tight ball games down the stretch. You need to run the football. Hey, it's late in the game. You need to ice a game. Is there a guy? Will there be a guy that you can turn to and say, we feel comfortable with this dude in the clutch situations? We feel comfortable with this guy leading our football team, leading our rushing attack. Who of the group emerges? That's yet to be seen, but they need desperately someone to do so, to call this season a success at the running back position. I spoke on it yesterday, guys, briefly. Keeping realistic expectations for Dakereon Joyner. We all have high hopes, the storybook ending to his career, a guy in Joyner who's already a folk hero in Columbia, South Carolina. I mentioned it yesterday, and I'll echo it yet again. 500 or more rushing yards for Dakereon Joyner would be a massive success. You have to keep in mind and keep in perspective. While I understand and listen, there are reasons to be optimistic about this move. I mean, Dakereon Joyner, let's be honest, when he was a quarterback, he was a dual threat quarterback and a quarterback that liked to run the football. So in regards to vision, seeing the defense, seeing the field, I mean, this is a guy, it's not like he's never been in the backfield before, right? It's not like he's never ran the football. So you do have that aspect. But you also have to keep in a perspective. This is a guy who's been at the wide receiver position the last, 3 or so years? It's not like he's taken reps at the running back position continuously over the last couple of seasons. And so when you factor that in, the challenges of playing the running back position, learning the nuances of it, and also the fact, guys, again, the offensive line's got to open holes. He's going to split carries with other guys on the roster as well. If he can eclipse 500 or more rushing yards, that, in my opinion, is a massive success. And it means that not only was Dakereon Joyner productive, but I think if he hits that total, I think this entire running back room was more productive and maybe more productive than we're expecting as well. Guys, I think Dowell Loggins needs to find – they're going to be really looking for creative ways to run the football, right? I think we all agree, right? South Carolina is not a football team that's just going to line up this year and, run it up the gut, the I formation, and pound the football and run it at will. They're going to have to get a little bit creative. Finding creative ways to utilize Juju McDowell's skill set. As I mentioned when I talked about Dakereon Joyner, is he a quarterback by trade? Maybe not. Is he a receiver by trade? Maybe not. Is he a running back by trade? Maybe even not, but he's an athlete, and he has a skill set that can help you win football games. Juju McDowell's the same way, guys. Yes, he's a scat back. He's 5'7". He's not built to run in between the tackles. But we saw it at times. We saw glimpses in 2021. We've seen it in the passing game. Heck, made huge plays down the stretch against Tennessee and Clemson. We've seen Juju McDowell be a big-time impact guy for South Carolina and make big plays for this football team. It is Dowell Loggins' responsibility to find creative ways to get him the football, to get him in space, to get him on the outside where he's most comfortable and where he can make big plays for you. I don't think it's good enough to say, well, he's a scat back, we can't run him at the middle, so there's no place for him. There absolutely is. And I think if you're not able to maximize his talent, if you're not able to get him the football in space, and understand, there's one football, there's a bunch of weapons that need to touch it, right? But I think Juju McDowell is one that does absolutely need to touch the football. Heck, you play UNC in week 1. He was really good against them in that 2021 Duke's Mayo Bowl. I think he popped off like a 50-yard run or so in that game. So Juju McDowell, while I don't think he's RB1 material, he is a guy that can help this football team find creative ways to get him involved in your offense. And again, that falls at the feet of new offensive coordinator Dowell Loggins. Guys, I want to see DJ Braswell make the most of his opportunities as a freshman because he's going to play. I mean, this is not a situation where, no, he's going to play. DJ Braswell is going to get an opportunity. And this is one of those situations, guys, as we mentioned, if South Carolina is going to get to 8-4, if they're going to get to, God forbid, 9-3, they got a couple young guys that are going to have to step up and play some key contributor roles for this football team. I think DJ Braswell is one of them. And if there's anybody in this room, guys, with all due respect to Dakereon Joyner, but if there's anybody in this room that I feel could really pop and could be that surprise 600 or 700-yard guy, it's DJ Braswell. When you look at the film, you look at the recruiting profile, maybe this is a guy as a true freshman that could burst on the scene. I'm not saying he needs to do that for it to be a success, by the way. I don't want to, mix that up. I'm not saying he has to do that. But making the most of the opportunities, right? Not being lost out there. He's going to be drinking water out of a fire hose. He's a true freshman. He wasn't there in the spring. He's going to get into fall camp, and he's going to have to learn this thing all at once. But making the most of the opportunities, capitalizing on them when you get them. DJ Braswell could be one of those key youngsters that helps push South Carolina over the top in this 2023 season. And guys, finally for me, when you talk about defining success, and I'll probably echo this when we talk offensive line next week. And I feel like these expectations, you're probably going to laugh at these because it feels like they're so easily attainable, right? The expectations, the bar, it's so low. But when you look at this rushing attack over the last couple of years, exclude 2020 because nobody played defense in 2020. South Carolina has struggled to run the football for a very long time. It's just, for whatever reason, whether it be O-line issues, I think that's what it's been more so of because you've had some capable players at the running back position. But it's a group effort, right, between the running backs, the offensive line, getting some sort of rushing attack going because I've mentioned to you guys, one of my greatest fears is that South Carolina will not be able to run the football in any capacity, and they're going to become one-dimensional. And if that happens, you don't have much of a chance against SEC defensive coordinators. All I'm asking for is for South Carolina to finish inside the top 100 in rushing offense. Pretty simple. Just the top 100 in rushing offense. Guys, and you might laugh at that. You scoff at that. Oh, my God. How dare you set such low expectations? Guys, this is a group. When you look back at last year, an offensive line that had 50-plus more starts on it, and a running back room that had a former 5-star in Marshawn Lloyd, had a really productive ACC back in Christian Beal-Smith, and had a Juju McDowell, and they couldn't do it. Finished outside of the top 100 in rushing offense. If this group can manufacture that, if Dowell Loggins, if this running back room, you're going to need multiple guys, I think, to overachieve and exceed expectations. I think it's possible because there's talent in the room. If this group can lead South Carolina to finishing inside the top 100 in rushing offense, it's a baby step. Nobody should throw a parade for it if you finish 90th in rushing offense. It's a baby step, but guys, it's still a step forward. It's still a step forward, and here's the thing. Here's the kicker. You don't need Marcus Lattimore toting the rock this year. You don't need Kevin Harris. You don't need Mike Davis. You just need to be good enough to give some sort of balance so that Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells, Trey Knox, Xavier Legette, that array of weapons you have, can operate. That's what it's all about. We're not asking the running backs to be, there to be a 1,000-yard rusher, this team to be a run-first football team. I don't think anybody has any misconception about it that this is going to be a pass-happy football team. This is probably going to be a 60-40 at minimum pass-to-run football team. But you got to at least be able to give the illusion that you have balance, the illusion that you can run the football. If you can finish inside the top 100 in rushing offense, while it is a baby step, I think it's a step forward for the Gamecocks rushing attack, and I think it's a great achievement when you factor in what South Carolina has to work with in the running back room. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the convo rolling as we wrap up talking Gamecocks running backs entering the 2023 football season. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Friday, July the 28th, 2023. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Just over 15 minutes, we'll have my good friend Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate to talk all things Gamecocks football. Mark was at ACC Media Days yesterday, so maybe we'll get some intel on the arch rival. Either way, really looking forward to talking with Mark Ryan. We did not get to touch base with him last week due to really the shoddy Wi-Fi at the Airbnb in Nashville, but excited to chat with him. Guys, that being said, we're going to keep the conversation rolling as we wrap up talking Gamecocks running backs in the 2023 football season. How would you grade South Carolina's ball carriers, that position unit specifically, entering this season? Let me preface by saying this. For those who maybe are new and don't understand the grading system and how I come up with these grades, I base my grades off of where does this room stack up in the SEC. That's really how I view this. You know, Spencer Rattler in the quarterback position, for example, I gave an A, not an A+. An A+ is reserved for, it is the best of the best. It's at minimum top 2 in the league. As you saw from my preseason quarterback rankings, I've got Spencer Rattler 4th. Therefore, an A grade. If the quarterback room was the 10th best in the league, I'd probably be floating somewhere more around the C- or C range, etc. So I think you guys can understand where I'm coming from when it comes to these grades. And it feels like at times there is some confusion. So I wanted to clarify that. So when it comes to this Gamecocks running back room, let's start with the positives, okay? DeCarrion Joyner is a guy that we're all expecting to be RB1 when the Gamecocks kick this thing off against UNC. And at every turn, he's proved the doubters wrong. He has succeeded when given an opportunity. Now, the opportunities have been limited, but it seems as if every time Dak Joyner touches the football, good things happen. He's played the quarterback position. He was a running quarterback. So he's comfortable running the football, has a feel of vision of the defense, if you will. I think there are a lot of reasons to believe he's also put on weight over the offseason. There are reasons to believe that the transition could be smooth for number 5. Juju McDowell, we have seen have success before. Granted, as a scat back, but he was really good as a true freshman. Numbers kind of dropped off somewhat last year, but a guy that we've seen in spurts what he's capable of. DJ Braswell, the 4-star signee, you look at his film, and it jumps out at you. I mean, it pops. It could be a guy that bursts on the scene as a true freshman, similar to what we've seen in years past, especially when the Gamecocks were at their best from 2009 to 2013. And finally, there's the Newberry transfer, Mario Anderson, who he wasn't just good, guys. He was one of the best in Division II, arguably the best, rushing for over 3,000 yards in his career and winning the version of basically the Division II Heisman Trophy. So a guy who's had success as a RB1 before. Now, on the other side, the reality of this running back room is this. A true freshman, a scat back, a Division II transfer, and a receiver now transitioning to running back. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. There are a lot of question marks, and there just simply aren't many answers. And so when you look at this room, I don't give grades and project things based off of hope, based off of dreams, based off of... You give grades based off of what you know. And what I know is this, guys. South Carolina returns a grand total of 275 rushing yards from a season ago from running backs in this room. Juju McDowell had 219 yards last year. De'Kevion Joyner had a grand total of 56. Losing Marshawn Lloyd was a blow. There's no way around it. And hindsight's 2020. People will demean his impact on the football team. They will take shots at him, and that's totally fine. It is what it is. Folks will defend a Gamecock until they're not a Gamecock, and then they will throw mud on your name. That's just how this thing works. I get it. And people don't want to hear this. But as you all know, I'm not in the business of telling you what you want to hear. I'm in the business of keeping it a buck. South Carolina not going out in the portal and landing a proven Power 5 running back to help bolster their running back position group, it was a swing and miss by Shane Beamer and company. Flat out bottom line. It just was. It was a swing and miss. And that's okay. There have been more home runs hit than swings and misses. But it was a swing and miss. South Carolina desperately, if for nothing else than competition purposes, needed to add someone, needed to add answers in the running back room, and they, for whatever reason, could not do it. You and I all watched the spring game. We all came out of the spring game saying the same thing. Not a SEC caliber RB1 on this roster. And De'Kevion Joyner, guys, let me say this. He could have a magical season in which, again, a storybook ending to his career. But as I mentioned before, how easy do we think it is to play running back? And if it's that easy, why has South Carolina struggled running the football for so long? Jaheim Bell was also a great athlete. He couldn't do it. He couldn't make it work. And I understand what some of you will respond with. Well, Chris, we didn't run the ball against Clemson at all, and we won the game. Great. That's a one-game sample size. Good luck winning more than 6 or 7 games doing that during all 13 games. Good luck. On the bright side, you have new blood at the offensive coordinator spot. I think with Dowell Loggins, maybe there's some more creativity. There's a reimagination of the rushing attack, and it's not going to be a situation with, well, we know O-line's a deficiency, we know running back's a deficiency, but damn it, we're going to try to do what we want to do anyways. Too often, I think that happened with Marcus Satterfield, where it was trying to put a square peg in a round hole. So there are reasons to believe that this running attack or rushing attack could get better. But you have to face the music when it comes to this running back room. Again, a Division II transfer, a true freshman, a scat back, and a wide receiver now playing running back. There's, dare I say, not a running back room in this conference with more question marks. There's, dare I say, not a running back room in this conference that I'm less sure about. And it's no secret, right? Because we talked about this a month or so ago when we power ranked the Gamecocks position units heading into the 2023 football season. This is the weak link on this football team. As of right now, this is the weakest position group. There's talent in the room, no doubt. But when you only have 275 rushing yards returning, and you weren't able to go to the portal and get someone who's done it at a high level before, a.k.a. the Power 5 level, not even the SEC level, the Power 5 level. What you got's what you got. So for those reasons I just mentioned, guys, I'm grading the Gamecocks running back position unit entering the 2023 football season a D. As I mentioned, it's the weakest position group on the football team. That does not mean, by the way, guys, the group cannot exceed expectations. That's not at all what it means. But going off of what we know right now, there's 10 times as many question marks as there are answers. And I know some of you say point to Twitty, point to Nathan Harris-Wainink, McCracken. Guys, those guys are not going to play. I think this is between DJ Braswell, De'Kevion Joyner, Juju McDowell, and Mario Anderson. Does anyone step up in that group? Is it a running back by committee? Can South Carolina find a way to manufacture a running game? We shall see. But if they do, based off the numbers and based off what they have, it will be against all odds. Guys, let's jump into another break. On the other side, we're going to get my guy Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate on the show to talk all things Gamecocks, football, and more. Appreciate you all tuning in. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Friday, July the 28th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Last show of the week, of course, as we conclude on this Friday. We'll be back normal schedule next week, of course, Monday through Friday, noon to 3 p.m. Eastern. Guys, just looking at the calendar, we've got one more show, one more TDC in the month of July, and then we will be in August. And y'all know what happens in August. College football is in August. Cannot wait, man. Cannot wait. Going to be a ton of fun. Again, we got Mark Ryan upcoming in the next minute or so. Really excited. Looking forward to chatting with Mark Ryan on all things Gamecocks, SEC, college football, everything in between. And you guys continue to flood the chat line. By the way, leave us your questions, your comments. Also call in 843-790-3377. Would love to hear from you all and just get your thoughts on everything we've discussed today. I know I see Lynn Turner talking the running backs. Right, we're going to dive into it, talk plenty of it. I appreciate you all. The beauty is truly in the banter. So, anyways, guys, appreciate it. We are 5 Saturdays from Gamecocks kickoff, 4 Saturdays from the start of college football. And, of course, NFL is just around the corner as training camp has officially begun, and Mark Ryan's going to be somebody who's going to be at training camp actually tomorrow for the Carolina Panthers at Wofford, and he joins the show right now, our good friend Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. Mark, my friend, what's going on? How are you? Great to see you once again.
Were you born wearing that shirt, Chris? Were you?
Like, I do tend to wear this. I do tend to wear this a lot when I speak to you. I don't know why. It's like just natural.
You were wearing that shirt coming out of the womb, my brother.
I don't know. It's kind of a funny happenstance, if you will. I don't know. I guess I was. Maybe I was. Either way. Mark, how you doing, my man? You're just coming fresh off of ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I'm sure that's a great way to get people to tune into our show. Let's kick off the show talking some Clemson football. Either way, how was ACC Media Days, my friends? Congratulations on going out there, the great content. I was able to follow that on social media, but how was it? And can you give us some insight, the mood of the arch rival? Because, Mark, you know as well as I do, people won't admit it, but who do people care the most about? Their favorite team and their rival. They want to know what's going on. Like, right? Let's not get it twisted. So what was the mood? What was the vibe from Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, and the Clemson Tigers yesterday?
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, you're exactly right. And I think that is something that you just said that is completely unique to this area. Okay. So being a Florida Gator and being from Florida, Florida fans don't really watch Florida State's games. Now, if they're losing to Jacksonville State when Jacksonville State is an FCS school and there's 2 minutes left in the game, we'll flip it on and your buddies will be texting you and so on and so forth. But let me tell you something, man. I've never seen that anywhere else like I've seen that here. And it's both sides of the rivalry. Mm-hmm. Y'all are obsessed with each other, and y'all are exactly like one another. I know you probably don't want to hear that, but you guys are one another, just wearing different colors. Chris, my first year here, I'm hosting the Clemson Network postgame show. And I'm walking into the stadium, and everyone's got their generators hooked up to their tents with TVs and the Gamecock game on. And I'm like, your game is about to start. What are you doing out here watching South Carolina lose? Your game is about to start. Then, Chris, I will see footage inside cockabooses, and everything in the cockaboose is guarded in black except one thing. What is that? Why is there orange on the TV? You allowed yourself to be filmed with Clemson on the TV? Really? That is blasphemy to me. Chris, can you explain to me what it is? I mean, to me, it's a tip of the cap to your rival that you care enough to watch them.
I mean, Mark, everything you're saying is true. I mean, I haven't spent a ton of time, obviously, at Clemson tailgates, but I do agree with you, and you might be surprised to hear this coming from me, but I mean, I think one of the reasons that Gamecocks and Tigers hate each other so much is they're identical. They're exactly alike. the two fan bases. I mean, and you know what? And I'll go a step further, Mark. I mean, that's what I realized when, I went on the road last year and went to a baseball series when the Gamecocks were playing Tennessee, and like, you meet enough SEC folk and SEC fans, and you just come to realize, like, we're all the same. Like, we really are. Like, there are some different things based off the area you're in, but like, when you really boil it down, when it comes to the passion, the pageantry, the love for your school, the hatred for your rival, we're all the same. Like, we really are. So, like, I think that is one of the reasons why Gamecock fans and Clemson fans hate each other so much, is because it's literally like your brother. Like, you're living with your brother, and there's so many, houses divided and all that. But like, you're very right, because I'm guilty of it as well, man. You'll be at the tailgate, and if South Carolina's got that 7:00 game, let's say Clemson's got the 3:30, bro, that Clemson game is on. I mean, it's on. Who are your two favorite teams? South Carolina and whoever's playing Clemson. And I'll tell you this, Mark, there's some people out there. Now, I'm not wired this way, although I guess the shirt wouldn't support my case. But there's some out there, Mark, on both sides, by the way, and this may go to every fan base. I can speak to Carolina and Clemson. There's some people out there, I'm convinced, they hate their rival more than they like their own team. I swear to you, based off their actions, the way they talk, and if that's how you want to operate, that's fine, but
here's what I would say to you, Chris. Here's what I would say to you. In terms of your viewership, right? People consuming your content, do you care whether they like you or hate you?
Do I care whether my viewership likes me or hates me?
Correct.
That's not something I keep top of mind when I, make content.
Same either. One of my favorite movies of all time. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it. Just don't watch it with kids. It's called Private Parts with Howard Stern. Chris, the Howard Stern haters watched his show, listened to his show for longer than the people who liked him. So realize, Gamecock fans, that you are tipping your cap in the most respectful way when you guys watch Clemson games. Realize that.
Yeah.
Because Clemson doesn't give a damn whether you like them or not. Clemson only cares that you watch them. I don't give a damn if you like me or not. I just care that you watch or listen.
Yeah.
Chris Phillips is exactly the same. So realize you are giving Clemson the biggest homage, the biggest bow of respect when you are watching their games. Now, Chris, what a roundabout way to get to your question. Clemson is filled with confidence. I had a sit down with Dabo Swinney yesterday, had a sit down with Cade Klubnik yesterday, absolutely beaming with confidence, and rightfully so. They've even given Dabo, Chris, the ridiculous blackjack hand of telling him that Florida State is the conference favorite. Dude, Florida State, where is this Florida State BS coming from? Chris, if Florida State played South Carolina tomorrow, I'm picking the Gamecocks. Seriously. The most recent thing I saw was South Carolina win on the road at the best team in the ACC. You think they can't beat Florida State, right? South Carolina went to Clemson last year and won. Clemson went to Florida State. Florida State was never in the game. They've got a playmaking quarterback. They've got a playmaking wide receiver. All right. They have inflated defensive numbers because they play in the All Cupcakes Conference. When they played Florida's awful offense, Chris, they gave up 460 yards. I guess the Gamecocks know something about that awful Florida offense too, don't they? But the reality is, Chris, they're beaming with confidence. I will tell you this, though, my friend. I did pick up a little bit of an awkward vibe at the ACC kickoff, a relative unease, because I think everyone had a bit of nostalgia wondering, is this one of the last ACC kickoffs we're ever going to go to in this iteration? And it was kind of like the white elephant or the pink elephant, whatever color elephant. It was like the elephant in the room. And you know me, Chris, I go right there. Okay. Like I'm talking, no one else was talking about that on our show. As loud as my voice is, I was talking about that. I was getting dirty looks. I didn't care. But there was this really kind of weird vibe, like, man, what's going to happen to this league? Because either the ACC or the Pac-12 is going to cease to exist or be kicked to the back page, right? I mean, that's going to happen to one of those two leagues now.
Mark, would you call Florida State the most overrated team in college football heading into 2023?
Unquestionably. And Chris, I say that even if they finish 10-2. Okay? It's not a matter of hate, Chris. It's a matter of schedule. It's a matter of looking at their schedule, and it's a matter of realizing they're 38% on the blue chip ratio, which isn't bad, but they're being hyped as a national championship contender, and they're just not that. Their line play has been poor. All right. Chris, again, my favorite Florida State stat. They were 5-3 in the All Cupcakes conference last year. I mean, like, what
Right.
Seriously, Chris, at what point does that sound like national championship contender to you? 5-3 in the ACC. Would the Gamecocks have had a better record in that league? You bet your ass they would have.
So, Mark, let me ask you this, because, again, you were there yesterday. Klubnik was there, Dabo Sweeney. Before we're going to get off of Clemson, I promise Gamecock folks in a second, but I catch a lot of hell for – I feel like just being honest and saying that I think Garrett Riley would have been a great hire. I think that whatever. My Garrett Riley takes. I mean, I'm just very honest about the fact that I wanted Garrett Riley.
Time out, Chris. Time out. I counted, Chris, yesterday 6 times. Word was circulating in the little foyer that we were in like the hotel ballroom area, that I was the quote unquote JV radio guy. Okay. Remember that? Okay. From Shane Beamer himself.
How could I forget?
I was the JV radio guy, and 6 different people came up to me unsolicited. I've never met these people before in the media, and asked me if that was me. And I said, yeah. All of the commentary was positive, Chris. A lot of people wondered why Beamer bothered to go down that road. I won't mention any names, but I made some new friends in Columbia media, and the word was positive. It's just like, can you imagine, Chris, being at a place like that? Like, you were at SEC Media Days, and then people start coming up to you and saying, people were telling me that JV radio guy was here. I had to meet JV radio guy. Are you JV radio guy? 6 times yesterday, Chris. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and that leads me to, and that, what a wild saga that was, Mark. But it leads me to, I mean, I'd love to hear, we don't really spend time talking about it, but do you think the Garrett Riley experience is going to work out at Clemson?
I do. And last week, Chris, we had a chance to speak to him at Clemson's media gathering. The guy, Chris, has it. Right? The guy has it. And just to backtrack one step on that, and then we'll move on. Chris, everybody wanted Garrett Riley. Everybody wanted Garrett Riley. If anybody's coach that had an open offensive coordinator position didn't want or reach out to Garrett Riley, in my opinion, they weren't doing a good job in their search. Okay? He was the number 1 candidate out there. And I think Clemson is going to average in the high 30s in terms of points per game this year, Chris. I think he's a fantastic hire. We've done like an over or under 2 years he'll be at Clemson, right? Is it going to be over that number or under that number? What do you think? But I really think, I know you want me to say, well, Mark, Chris, I don't think he's the guy, but I do think he's the guy. And I think he's going to utilize the weapons that Clemson has far better than they have been the last few years.
Mark, let's transition to SEC Media Days and the Gamecocks, obviously. What stood out to you from what Shane Beamer had to say? I mean, I think obviously he was his normal charismatic self, very energetic, did a great job selling the program. But did anything specifically jump out from what you heard from Shane Beamer in Nashville?
Yeah, you know what, man? I really like the story of Shane Beamer and how he watched the SEC Media Days as a kid, and then he was getting to live that. I thought that was something, Chris, that was relatable to so much of our audience and relatable to you and I, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Chris, I'm sure you had pinch me moments when you were at SEC Media Days. Mm-hmm. I've seen you appearing on other podcasts now that probably came as a result of appearing at SEC Media Days, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, for me, yesterday, it was my 3rd ACC kickoff. I walked in there, Chris, with a strut like I belonged, but I didn't have that strut the first 2 years there. You know what I'm saying? The first 2 years I was like, oh man, I got to pay my dues and mind my P's and Q's. And I'm the new kid on the block out here. This year, within an hour, I was the JV radio guy that everyone had to come and say hi to and get my opinion on the tweet that shook the South in January. So I really, Chris, was impressed with with Beamer's vision for the program. I was impressed with the accountability that he's highlighting where South Carolina is falling short, right? I would have liked to have heard a little bit more on how he's going to improve the line play, offensive line, defensive line. Because as you know, Chris, right, you can't expect the Gamecocks to be the only team in America with a winning record being outside the top 100 in rush offense and rush defense again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I was able to ask Beamer a question specifically about that and Travian Robertson rush defense, what they're planning on doing. And I thought it was it was interesting, but for sure. I mean, I think, Mark, that's going to be, the big question as, fall camp gets going next week. And I'll ask you this, Mark, based off of what you know about this football team, fall camp is an important couple of weeks where you're really going to figure out if you're the coaches, those in the building, what you have and where your deficiencies are. And then you start scheming and game planning for game one. What issue do you think is most important for South Carolina to address during fall camp? Again, there's things that, it's going to take on the field and in-game action to learn. But, if you're South Carolina, put yourself in their shoes, what do you think is the most important issue you've got to solve during that time during fall camp?
Getting the running game going, Chris. I can't say it's naming a running back, right? I've got to say it's getting the running game going. And that involves the cohesion of the offensive line. That involves determining who your RB1 is, right? And determining how that can be a viable part of your offense. Because, gosh, Chris, and I asked you this on my show, what was it, Monday? I said, does Nick Harbor have a chance to be skill position player number 2 after Juice Wells? And you said, not yet. Tell me if I'm misquoting you here. Not yet, but maybe. Right? So, Chris, if the Gamecocks are able to have balance on offense, you've got a top 10 offense in Columbia. Okay? And I don't think anybody is saying that throughout college football. There's a reason, Chris, I'd beat the Gamecocks to beat Florida State. I'd pick the Gamecocks to beat Florida State on a neutral field tomorrow. Okay? The Gamecocks have SEC talent. Florida State does not. And I'm a huge believer in Rattler's arm. And I just don't know, beginning of the year, how long it's going to take that offense to click with a new offensive system. But to me, Chris, I mean, do you agree or disagree? I mean, you've got to get that running game going, right? Offensive line, running game. The way that team, if the analytics are right on that team, Chris, and they underwhelm this year, they go between 5-7 and 7-5. If the analytics are right, it's going to be because defense were able to tee off on Spencer Rattler because the Gamecocks couldn't run the football. I'm Mark Ryan, and I approve that message.
and I would agree with you, Mark. And I'll say, I mean, again, I know it's, but it's funny. It feels like every year by the time we get to kickoff, Gamecock fans are so tired of hearing me talk about the line of scrimmage. But, I mean, it's true, Mark, to your point. I actually put out a clip this morning, and I somewhat kind of took our conversation from Monday and carried it over into yesterday in regards to, the numbers, the computers, and who's right and who's wrong, right? Because the computers say you should be fighting for bowl eligibility. What on the field says is you're overachieving and you're fighting to win 8 or 9 games, right? So like you mentioned, who is right? And I think it's a fascinating conversation. What it tells me is this: the margins for error are, the margins for error are razor thin for South Carolina. You got to be opportunistic as hell on defense. You got to make every big play in special teams. You've got to make the big plays when they count and be great under pressure to get yourself. You got to do almost everything right, push all the right buttons to get to that 8-win or 9-win mark. To your point, Mark, if those things don't happen and those numbers, the rushing game woes, stopping the run, they don't change, 6-6 is within real possibility for South Carolina. And ironically enough, Mark, that's what we're doing right now on my airwaves is breaking down. We're doing these position unit previews, and I gave the running back room a D. And I'm going to give the offensive line pretty damn near close to that because when you stack it up, and the way I do this, Mark, is stacking up these units in the SEC, you look at every single publication and you just look at who they have. Right now, it's one of the worst in the league. Now, will it finish that way? I don't know. I certainly hope not. But right now, it's one of the worst in the league. The defensive front is probably one of the worst in the league. South Carolina has to fix those two areas, Mark Ryan. They have to because, to your point, you got Spencer Rattler, you have Juice Wells, Trey Knox, Xavier Legette, Nick Harbor. There's no shortage of skill position players. Are you going to be able to even give the illusion of having balance in your offense? I don't think anybody's got it twisted that it's going to be pass heavy. I don't think they're going to have much of a choice, but like when you go up against the Georgias of the world, the Tennessees, even the Floridas, I'm just talking SEC caliber defenses. If you're one-dimensional, it's going to be really hard. And if coaches are able to, hey, identify, let's not let South Carolina beat us in special teams, well, then what do you do? I mean, then where do your answers come? So that's, I mean, and it could go the other way, Mark, but that is my greatest concern, or one of them with South Carolina is, and, you know, it's a matter of Jimmys and Joes, I think, far more than X's and O's at this point.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, the worst case scenario for the Gamecocks to me is 5-7. The best case is 9-3. What did you and I pick the Gamecocks to be? Right smack in the middle of that, 7-5. Mm-hmm. Athlon's College Football Preview Magazine says, okay, so, you know, if anybody thinks Chris and I are hating, right? I'm just going to share with you what we're seeing, what we're consuming. Athlon's College Football Preview Magazine says South Carolina's defensive line in terms of the SEC teams is 12th out of 14. Athlon's College Football Preview Magazine says South Carolina's offensive line is 13th out of 14 SEC teams. And so, you know, look, there's only so many previews you can do before you just roll the ball out and say, let's play. And teams overachieve all the time. We're certainly not saying, Chris, that South Carolina can't do that. But if Athlon's magazine is correct and the analytics guys are correct, there are going to be some angry birds in Columbia.
And again, just the analytics side, I think, Mark, is fascinating. Let's take it off the line of scrimmage, though, for a second, just to have some fun. Let's say the O-line play exceeds expectations. And I'm not saying South Carolina in any way has a 1,000-yard rusher, but they're able to have an average running game. They finish inside the top 100. Do you believe Spencer Rattler is the guy to lead South Carolina to a 9-3 football season? Do you think he can show consistency week 1 to week 13? Because, Mark, I made this point, and I'm not trying to be the guy that, because I'm very optimistic about what Beamer's doing, this football team. I picked 7-5, but I picked them to finish down the stretch very strong. Like, you know what angle I'm coming from. But I think what's fascinating is this. When you really do a deep dive in a late last season, the Tennessee game was magnificent, right? I mean, 6 touchdowns, no picks, 430. You look at the last 2, though, Mark, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. I mean, it was a lot of the Spencer Rattler that we saw the first 10 games with just more vertical passing. So I just wonder, you don't want Spencer Rattler to stop being himself, but he's got to cut out some of the bad turnovers, man, because you were there in Clemson. It's very rare you're going to throw a pick 6 and a pick in the end zone and win that ballgame.
Chris, can the Gamecocks beat North Carolina? They can. Can they beat Mississippi State? They can. Can they beat Florida and Missouri? They can. Chris, you win those games, you are 9-3. You know what I'm saying? So, is it possible? Yeah. You know, my concern is, though, that North Carolina, that Mississippi State game are so important, and it's coming really early in a new scheme, not only a new scheme, but with the Gamecocks version potentially of a Percy Harvin level of playmaker and Nick Harbor kind of finding his way with the offense as well, right? If there was ever a season for the Gators to get the Gamecocks before November, it's this one, right? Because I think this team is going to be playing its best football at the end of the season. Look, man, lots of reason for excitement and optimism. And given what we've seen from Shane Beamer, Chris, you know I wouldn't bet against him. I do not think we're going to see the worst case scenario for South Carolina because Shane Beamer is there, right? There is a chance we could see the best case scenario for South Carolina this year, which would create a ton of excitement. And there's an inconvenient truth here for Clemson fans, okay? An inconvenient truth. And that is that South Carolina is making right now roughly $30 million more a year than Clemson is, which is why Clemson and Florida State and all those schools want out of the ACC, which I said 2 years ago, right? I had a scoop on that 2 years ago. And I said yesterday, Chris, if you're Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, what do you do? And I'm going right to the networks and I'm saying, we have to have a new grant of rights. If these schools want to leave, we got to let them out. I know you're going to tell me that sounds crazy, but we got to let them out. We don't want to hold people in a league against their will. what we want is to have a grant of rights that they want to be a part of. And so, like ESPN and the networks are going to say, well, no, we have a television contract. We have a television contract. If you hold these teams to that, Chris, and you attempt to do so until 2036, teams are going to be fighting, scratching, and clawing to get out of that, to leave the conference. They're going to have such a bad taste in their mouth, and they're going to leave, and the ACC is going to dissolve the first chance that they get. You need to establish a new deal, because in the end, Chris, that piss-poor TV contract is resulting in a piss-poor TV product for the ACC, because those schools aren't getting the money that South Carolina is. And, if South Carolina were to go on a 3-game winning streak against Clemson, that $30 million windfall a year is going to be a huge reason why.
Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. Mark, I appreciate you taking the time in. I know you got to run. Let everybody know, by the way, you're going to be out at Panthers training camp tomorrow at Wofford. Yep. You want to plug the show? You guys are live 9 to 11, I believe?
Are you going to be there? Are you going to be out there?
There's a high probability I will be stopping by and saying hello, yes, because I
All right.
Not too far from me. I've never seen Wofford Stadium, and, man, I'm just itching for football, man. So I might have to swing by and say what's up. Is it going to be you and Diesel or no?
Diesel, myself, and Rob Brown will be out there doing the live show.
Crew.
We'll be inside the Jerry Richardson indoor basketball gymnasium, which, Chris, that is the nicest small indoor stadium you've ever seen in your life. We'll have a live show there 9 to 11. Then, Chris, they let us out in the field for practice. So we'll be out in the field getting a bird's eye view of Bryce Young and company. So it is a super fun day. We invite you guys to come out. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, would love to have the chance to do so. Chris, same to you, man. Hope to see you out there. And we're at Mark Ryan on Air, guys. It's MARC Ryan on Air. And we appreciate you guys so much.
Mark, appreciate you, man. Take care. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Great stuff from our friend Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. That was far more Clemson talk than I expected or wanted, but I mean, let's face it, guys. We're all curious. We all love college football. We all love talking ball, and that's exactly what we do on these airways. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll kick off our Q&A Power Hour. I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your calls, and more. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Friday, July the 28th. Appreciate you all tuning in. Really excited to get into our Q&A Power Hour. I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your calls as well. 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Let's get into your questions in the YouTube comments. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you get notifications of when we drop new video content. Also, if you want to support the business, support the channel, support the content, support everything we do, you can do so through Super Chat, Super Stickers. Goes a long way, guys, and we really, truly do appreciate it. Let's see. Edward says, 800 yards combined will be successful, talking about the running backs. I think you could do more than that as a room. I think you could hit 1,000 as a room. Less than 800 would be rough. Less than 800 would be really rough. Great point here by Edmund, though. He says the line has to help whoever it is. That's a fact for sure. Lynn says, talking about De'Carrion Joyner, however, has been in the backfield. He'll be better at running back than wide receiver. I mean, Lynn, I would absolutely agree because De'Carrion Joyner, let's call it for what it is, did not play at wide receiver. I mean, that's it. He didn't play. He didn't really get an opportunity at wide receiver. Well, hold on now. I say he did not get an opportunity. He was not high enough on the depth chart to get reps at the wide receiver position. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, Coach Beamer didn't give him an opportunity. Like, I don't think he could really crack the starting 3 or 4 at the wide receiver position. Let's see. Jeff Gullidge, if we got 100 yards a game this season rushing, would that be successful for me? Yes. I'd have to look back at the numbers from last year, Jeff, exactly what they were. Need to finish over 100 yards, though. Absolutely. Absolutely. Travis says, hope the Braswell kid is the truth. I mean, from what we've heard, I think there's a good chance that he will be. Brian Dean, speaking of Loggins, do you think he'll be more productive than Garrett Riley? Loggins, from my understanding, is going to scale back what USC did last season. He also says, and Riley's going to put it in the air. I think, all right, so speaking of Loggins, do you think he's going to be more productive than Garrett Riley? Brian, I think they're two very different situations. I think you're going down a slippery slope when you try to compare those right up against each other. What success for Clemson may not be success for South Carolina and vice versa. I think Dowell Loggins is undoubtedly an upgrade over what South Carolina had. Is Dowell Loggins' ceiling as high as what Garrett Riley's may be? I have no idea. I have no clue. We'll have to wait and find out and see. I got to be honest, guys. And, listen, we have very open and honest conversation here and keep it a buck. I nearly cringed when Mark Ryan brought up the Garrett Riley, South Carolina stuff again. I was like, God, let's please not go back down this rabbit hole because it benefits no one. It benefits no one, man. I mean, it really doesn't. Anyways, let's see. Getting back into your questions. Robbie says, it could take all the running backs just to run the ball because we don't really have a proven running back. Robbie, you are very right. That's a good point. We do not have a proven running back. That is for sure. Braddock843, what's going on? Appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. Cody says, I know this is a random thought, but am I the only one who completely forgot about the 2018 Outback Bowl against Michigan? Asking for a friend. Yeah, well, I mean, Cody, I don't think you're the only one that forgot, Cody, because the simple fact is this. Most people, unfortunately, try to block out the Will Muschamp era, even the good parts of it. Good, bad, and different. People try to block that out as best they can. Just call it for what it is. I mean, that game is long forgotten, Cody. Long forgotten. Let's see. Justin Langford. Braswell could be a non-injury riddled Rico Dowdle. It's not a bad comparison. I mean, we'll see. We have no idea what this kid's going to be. Braddock says, can't be one-dimensional. Teams will pick up on that quickly. You're absolutely right. Lynn Turner, I don't think it's easy to play running back. What I do say is that DK5 ran the ball in high school. He should have good vision in the backfield. My question is, will he be able to block well enough? That is another big question, Lynn. That is another big question for sure. Jacob E., just shoddy O-line play in our history. Beamer seems to be on the path to correct that. Let's see. John Edwards says, we are nothing like Clemson fans. They are worse. John Edward, again, these are honest conversations that you're just not going to be willing to have. Get this. There is a John Edward in the Clemson fan base. There is a version of John Edward, different person, but someone that is very similar to you, John Edward, that's a Clemson fan. And they would say the exact same thing that you say. I don't even say it as like, I'm not saying they're identical. I just think the fan bases are much more similar than people give credit for. That's why the hatred is so strong. I mean, really, truly. That's why the hatred is so strong. John Edward, we watch Clemson not because we're enamored with them. We watch to pull against them. I mean, I think that's fair. CCM says Clemson's going to lose to Duke. Do you think so? John Edward, Mark equals Clemson Homer. He's literally a Florida Gator fan. I don't know what else to tell you. John Edward says, Mark, JV Radio got John Edward's on one. John Edward is on one. John Edward is on. You got a short fuse this week, John Edward. You got a very short fuse this week. Bruin Nation says John Edward is Dabo's son. God, come on, man. John Edward, in my opinion, they are the worst than some others we play. Fair enough. Let's see. Will says, I hope Dowell's the guy for us. I do like what I'm hearing from him, but I definitely wanted Riley. Anyone that didn't is lying to themselves. Bruin Nation says it'll be scrutinized all season, especially if we're struggling on offense. Bruin Nation, do you remember the day that social media lost its mind when I said that the hiring of Garrett Riley at Clemson put more pressure on Dowell Loggins to succeed at South Carolina? Remember how silly that was, the way people reacted to that? I mean, dude, it was the insecurities of people during that time when Dowell Loggins was hired and then Garrett Riley was hired. The insecurities of people really shined through during that time period. I mean, it really did. My take wasn't even a hot take. My take was simply they got a hot commodity in the OC search. I'm not saying it's going to be a home run, but if theirs works out, South Carolina's better work out. That's all. I mean, dude, and you would have thought, I mean, dude, it's just crazy, man. It's crazy. That was crazy. That whole, I mean, I never would have thought offensive coordinator chatter would have produced that much madness and that much insanity. I just would have never thought that. I would have never thought that. Truly, genuinely, honestly, would have never thought that. Let's see. Robbie Davis, I always want Clemsucks to lose. I can't stand Clemsucks. I hear you. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. So my guy Keith says, how much of it is the line compared to the running back? I mean, Keith, they go hand in hand. Listen, it doesn't help the running back position that South Carolina's offensive line is also regarded as one of the worst in the SEC. It doesn't help, right? I mean, even if you had fantastic running backs and, you had Marcus Lattimore, right? Like, blocking for them is a concern. But again, it just it's funny to me that, people will pretend that, losing Marshawn Lloyd wasn't a big deal and that he wasn't very good. And they'll say every little thing they can about him and I'm not sitting here as a Marshawn Lloyd stan or anything, but guys, I would have welcomed Marshawn Lloyd back with open arms. I'd take Marshawn Lloyd back right now. Like, I really would. I still wish he wouldn't have left. So, because again, this time last year, all I heard from Gamecock fans was Marshawn Lloyd's the best running back in the SEC. Marshawn Lloyd this, Marshawn Lloyd that. And there's not a guy in this room that is as good as Marshawn Lloyd. There's just not. There's not. Stats maybe better, sure, but I don't think there's a guy in this room that's better than Marshawn Lloyd was. We'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell for sure. But anyways, guys, on a random content note, by the way, I know that, a couple of months ago during baseball season, we were doing the Rowdy Rooster Rundown series where that was on Sunday nights after games. TBD on Rowdy Rooster Rundown, because I started to think, and I'm like, I think it might just be kind of overkill to do the post-game call-in show and give a post-game reaction and then really talk about on Sunday night all of the things that I'd be talking about on Monday anyways. You know what I mean? So just stay tuned. I don't know that the Rowdy Rooster Rundown is going to be a thing, and I was thinking I love getting out that content for our morning commuters on Monday at 5 a.m., getting the reaction to them. But I mean, we're going to be uploading all of the post-game call-in shows to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, etc. So, that's going to be content you can tune into. So again, guys, just stay tuned is all I'm saying. I'm still kind of working through what we're going to do in regards to, game week content, content on that Sunday. Of course, we've already planned on, we're going to be sitting right here 10 minutes or around 10 minutes, just after the conclusion of every single game, taking your questions, comments, and calls. And those call-in shows are going to be wild, man. I can't wait for it. It's going to be electric. I can't wait. I mean, it's going to be absolute madness because basically, and you guys might recall, the voicemails that we will play on the podcast, if you will, that's going to be the call-in show. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait. Can't wait. Will says, Harbor over under 15 snaps a game. What are you taking? Early in the season, Will, I'm going under for sure. When it's all said and done, is the average 15? No, I'm going to go around 10. I'm going to float around the 10 number. Will, I would take under on the 15. I would take under on the 15, believe it or not. Because Will, excuse me, what you have to keep in mind is South Carolina has a number of different playmakers. You go down the list: Juice Wells, Trey Knox, Xavier Legette, Amarian Brown, Eddie Lewis, Joshua Simon, DeCarrion Joyner, Juju McDowell, Mario Anderson, Dontavius Braswell. Then you get to a Nicholas Harbor. They got all these different guys they need or want to get the football to. How many snaps is Nicholas Harbor going to be able to get? Again, I think we get to midseason, I think his workload's going to increase, but I think Will just right off the jump, I mean, I don't think they're going to be thrusting him out there and asking too much of him, if that makes sense. And I'll tell you guys, just on that note, Will, you talk about snap count. Dude, I can't wait for kickoff. I mean, I really can't. I really can't, man. It's going to be a blast. I mean, the way that we're producing content right now and just the amount of content and the amount of, guys, the podcast numbers, I mean, I'll give you some perspective on the podcast. The way we're distributing content, obviously we made this change a couple of months ago where the way we're distributing the podcast and everything else, the way we're doing the Daily Crow is all changed. If you want some perspective, and this is a testament, a shout out to you guys for your love, your support, rolling with the punches, and it being so well received and embraced by you all, to give you some perspective how well the podcast is doing right now. We topped out last football season. I'd have to look at the numbers exactly, but it was around 60 to 65,000 downloads in a month. I think that was like October or something, like maybe November. 60 to 65,000 downloads in a month. That's pretty good. That's not too bad in my opinion. To give you some perspective, the way it's impacted us positively, how we're distributing content right now, we're on pace, and there's just a couple days left in the month, but we're on pace to hit 60,000 guys this month. And it's July. You know what I mean? So I can't say thank y'all enough, man, for the love, the support. We're going to set records this football season. I'm confident we're going to set records with the podcast. We're going to set records in merchandise. We're going to set records all across the board, and it's all because of your love and support, man. So I genuinely cannot say thank you enough. I can't say thank you enough. I mean, to be honest, you guys have given me a life I once only dreamed of. And so, again, I cannot thank you enough. Getting back into your questions, comments, everything else. Brian Dean, Chris, how do you think that Cameron Sumlin, is it? I thought it was Sandlin. Either way, how will he do it running back? 6 foot 225? Brian, we'll see. Again, we'll see. We shall see. We shall see. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know. I got to be honest with you, Brian. I don't know much about the kid. I don't know much about the kid. I really don't. "29 days away from Vandy in Hawaii." How about that? By the way, guys, our good friend SEC Michael Bratton, he dropped on that SEC podcast. He's been dropping all the interviews he's done from SEC Media Days. Our interview actually came out today. It went Mike Yuva and yours truly back to back. So a lot of fun. Y'all be sure to go check that out. Really, really good stuff. Let's see. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I think we're going to get SEC Mike on the show sometime next week. Let's see. Brian Dean, read on another site, Coach White is very excited about his linebackers, Giddy even. Yeah, Brian, I tell you this. I'm excited to talk linebackers in our position unit preview series. I think that's a position group that you talk about upside and projections. I think they project very well. Again, I'm not saying there's going to be all SEC players in there, but like I made the prediction right on defense that Pup Howard is going to be a freshman all-SEC player. I really do believe that. I think there's, for the first time in a long time, I think there's real reason to have optimism about the linebacker position. And it's been a while since we've been able to say that. It's been a while. So it's absolutely been a while for that room. Guys, I will tell you this. Again, I've hinted at it and mentioned it many times. It's no secret about talking more SEC content. And one of the reasons I'm really excited for it is because when you talk the entire SEC, you really, truly never run out of things to talk about. It's when you think about the fact how much content we create and how we're able to day in, day out for 3 hours talk nothing but Gamecocks. I mean, that's impressive. Think about when you got 14 and then this time next year, 16 teams at your disposal. Chase says, stop being a PAB. I don't know what that means. Let's see. Here's a great question, and that I would love to open this up to the masses as well. Beat Georgia, but lose to Clemson, or lose to Georgia and beat Clemson again? This answer, it's going to differ for people based off of where you live, who you surround yourself with in regards to, are you surrounded by more Georgia fans or Clemson fans? It's tough. It's tough because what beating Georgia would mean CCM for South Carolina early. Can you imagine? I mean, let's just go to this place for a second. Can you imagine South Carolina beating Georgia and starting out 3-0? Like, can you even imagine the buzz, the excitement? I mean, it would be insane. South Carolina would probably be a top 10 team, right? The Gamecocks would probably be a top 10 team. But I tell you, beating Clemson again, man, Is there anything better for this fan base than beating Clemson? Is there? I mean, really, truly, honestly, I don't know how you say anything other than Clemson. I just – because here's the thing. There'd be no shame in losing to Georgia. Like they're the number one team in the country. You know what I mean? Like, there'd be no shame. If I have to pick one, I'm probably going with the Clemson victory again. That's just where I'm landing on it. Chase says, if you cover 14 teams, you'll be bald and have no time for the gym, is what you're saying. Not quite, my guy. Not quite. Not quite. By the way, guys, as we go into the weekend, do not forget the season simulation series picks back up on Sunday night as we will take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, 7 o'clock on Sunday night. Then Monday night at 7, we'll simulate Tennessee. And then Tuesday night at 7, we will simulate the game against Florida. Going to be a lot of fun. Those are going to be 3 really fun games. So we're 1-2 right now in the simulation. Dude. And you know what? I tell you this. South Carolina could start 1-2. By the way, have we thought about that? That's one of the things that kind of makes me nervous. I know that Vegas has North Carolina as a favorite, but I don't think I've seen a single person out there picking North Carolina to win that game. Certainly no SEC personality, what have you, is picking South Carolina to lose that game. No Gamecock person certainly is picking South Carolina to lose that game. Have we thought about the fact and grasped the fact that the Gamecocks could lose to North Carolina? Have we? And let me ask you this. I think the expectation this season is 8-4. Very fair. Getting back and matching last year's win total. What happens if South Carolina loses to UNC? Let's just play the hypothetical game. We'll play it the other way too. Don't worry. What happens if South Carolina loses to UNC? How much of a reset is that for expectations? Because I don't think that's the most important game of the year, but that's definitely a game that's a tone setter and one that it's going to reset the expectations. Like, I think if you lose to UNC, I think 6-6 very much so comes into play. Very much so. Very much so. On the flip side, I'm not even going to talk Georgia. Let's talk Tennessee. What if you beat the Vols again? What if you beat the Vols? Let's say you don't lose to Mississippi State either. What if you beat the Vols? You know, we've been labeling these games, right? Like UNC's a tone setter. Florida's my most important game of the season, the game that you cannot lose and maximize your potential in this season. I think Tennessee is probably the biggest swing game in terms of that's a game that all of a sudden, if you go to Rocky Top and you win that ball game, I think you start to bring in 9 wins into the picture. Maybe even better. I don't want to get too aggressive with it, but that is absolutely a game you want to kick the door down early and, really show the SEC, show the college football world, hey, South Carolina football has arrived under Shane Beamer. Go win in Knoxville. Because that's a game that, while it's a toss-up, I don't think anybody's giving you a chance. Nobody's expecting you to go into there and win, especially after last year. That game against Tennessee, I think arguably serves as the biggest swing game of this season in terms of reaching 9 wins or even more in 2023. So it's, and South Carolina's right there with the likes of Arkansas, with Auburn, with Mizzou, with Kentucky. There's so many middle-of-the-pack teams, guys, in the SEC that it's like one thing or one or two things goes the right way, and we're talking about them as that surprise team in the SEC East. Like, really, truly. I mean, guys, imagine if South Carolina were to start 4-1. Right? UNC, Furman, Tennessee, Mississippi State, 4-1. 4-1 going to Florida. 5-1, guys. Imagine. Imagine Carolina is 5-1 going into College Station. I mean, y'all want me to put the garnet glasses on? Here they are. And I will say this. I think admittedly at times, I do spend a lot of time talking about the question marks. I'm just someone, I like to see it for what it is, not what I hope it to be. So I keep it very real. But again, Shane Beamer has proven to us that things can work out much better than we expect. And if that offensive line, if they are able to in the next 4 weeks really put that thing together, just get enough out of them, have some semblance of a running game, and Spencer Rattler limits the turnovers, guys, the Gamecocks have the pieces. I mean, they have the pieces. And this is a team coming off of last year, riding that confidence from beating Tennessee, beating Clemson. You just never know. I mean, you just never know what, what Shane Beamer and company can do. Chase Floyd, if I could time out Chris after the blasphemy of us possibly not going 12-0 this year, I'd do it. I hear you, Chase. How dare me? Brian Dean, I don't see us losing to UNC because as bad as our defense was last year, UNC's defense was worse. That's a great point you make, Brian. Yeah, I mean, listen, their defense is bad. I mean, it's Brian, it goes back to what I've said, right? That for all the question marks, and great question and great point, Brian, for all the question marks that the Gamecocks have on the line of scrimmage, I just don't think UNC has the guys to make South Carolina pay. You know, I just don't think they have those bodies. I do not think they have those bodies that are going to give South Carolina trouble. I don't think they have it. Do not think they have it. So it'll get much tougher when you get into SEC play and you take on the likes of Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Mizzou, Kentucky, etc. But, like, I don't see UNC having those bodies. I could be totally wrong, but you look at what they did last year, man. They couldn't stop a nosebleed defensively. They couldn't stop it. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to think about how similar these two teams are, South Carolina and North Carolina, when you think about the question marks that both have, right? Line of scrimmage, defense, run ball, stop run, new OCs on both sides. Both have big-time quarterbacks. That game one's going to be fascinating. That game one's going to be a lot of fun. That should be an exhilarating matchup, like a really fun to watch, entertaining matchup. I really do think so. Really, really do think so. So, and College Game Day. How many of y'all are going to attend? By the way, guys, do not forget the Beat UNC shirts are officially out. We've posted those to social media. I'll repost those today as well. Really, really great stuff in our collaboration with the College Collection and Walker Kennedy Art. Those guys did a fantastic job. Austin says, when does the headshot arrive? Austin, I got to get you a headshot. Yeah. How are we going to print it out, though, Austin? That's my question. I don't know. We'll talk about that more on the other side of the break. I want to continue to hear from you, more of your questions, your comments, your calls, and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Marshall Dougie, ho. Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Friday, July the 28th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, thank you all so much for the continued love and support here on this Friday. What do y'all want to talk about? Let's get into it, man. Let's see. David Barnes says, what are Joyner's ratings on revamp? I think he's like at running back, he's like a 70. I don't know. I'd have to look. Yeah, I'd have to look specifically, David Barnes. I have no idea. Bruin Nation, what's up, my man? 15-0, spot the damn ball. You know, Bruin Nation, you know what I've learned, my guy? You know what I've learned is to not say, you know, Bruin Nation, things have been calm on social media. Because, like, every time I say that, within the next 24 hours, some craziness occurs. You know what I mean? Like, something happens to where it goes wild. So I've just learned to say, you know what? Just keep it moving no matter what. Just keep it moving no matter what. Let's see. Yeah, I will get you the Walston. I'll get you the headshot. No doubt. I'll get you the headshot. Guys, I want to very interesting tweet here, the headline at least, from the Fan Upstate. And this takes us back to kind of what Mark Ryan was talking about in recruiting. Let's see. Real quick, Saturday Down South ranks Carolina, Tennessee as the number 1 matchup number 9 matchup of the SEC football season. Number 1 is Georgia, Tennessee, then LSU, Bama, Tennessee, Bama, Bama, A&M, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Georgia, Florida, Georgia, Bama, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Auburn and Alabama, which is crazy that we're looking for. I can't believe Auburn and Alabama is that low. That seems wild to me. Let's see. There was let's get into this. There was a tweet here, if I can find it. Talking about Clemson recruiting. And I also saw Sports Talk put something out as well. Here we go. The Fan Upstate tweeted this. Dabo Sweeney says he actively tries to talk recruits out of coming to Clemson to vet them and evaluate who really wants to be there. I need to listen to the audio of that because that just sounds... So he tries to talk recruits out of coming there. I don't know, guys. That just sounds weird to me. That sounds very, very strange to me. Let's see. I don't know. Either way, guys, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Our friends at Sports Talk, Phil Kornblue, who, by the way, I ran into and met in person for the first time at SEC Media Days. Really awesome stuff, and I appreciate Phil taking the time. They tweeted something, because they were at ACC Media Days also. They tweeted something about, here, actually, it's in our Big Cock Club Discord, about recruiting. I wanted to highlight this. This didn't get a whole lot of attention, but I think it's fascinating. Get this, guys. Get this. A note from the Clemson Football Media Guide. The 4 classes signed thus by the Tigers this decade had a total of 12 from South Carolina. Only 12. The Tigers signed 22 from Georgia, 12 from Florida, 11 from Alabama, and 6 from Texas. They do not have a commitment from a South Carolina prospect for the 2024 class at this point. And I know Clemson fans are going to write that off as, well, we're a national brand. We don't have to recruit the state. But I will say, when you look at some of the prospects coming out of the state of South Carolina, it is really, dare I say, surprising when you hear those numbers. I mean, again, I will say this. I think the whole put up a fence around your state thing when it comes to recruiting is somewhat overplayed, because the goal is not to give an offer to every kid who's a decent high school football player in South Carolina. That's not the goal. It's not. The goal is to go out and get the 25 or so best players you can. They're going to help your roster. That's the end goal, right? So I don't give a damn. Listen, you could sign all 25 or 20 or whatever from the state of South Carolina. That don't mean you're going to be very good, right? You know, one of my buddies works for another SEC school, and he told me, Chris, you know, we try to put up that fence around our state, but we're trying to go out there and get the 25 best players in the country to come help us play, to come help us win. So, you know, I think putting up the fence around the state is a little bit, maybe it's overplayed, but it's surprising, though, that Clemson doesn't make it more of a priority. You know what I mean? So, Austin Gregory, way too early, but the number 1 and number 2 overall recruits in 2025 are trending to South Carolina. Again, number 1 and number 2 players in the country. Austin, you know, it'd be great. Go 8-4 or 9-3. Boom. Get them in there. I mean, it's momentum, baby. Momentum. Jacob E., while we may own South Carolina recruiting, the best players in Clemson history are from out of state. I mean, Jacob, that's a great point. I mean, listen, when you're Clemson and you're recruiting, you're getting the number 1 player from the state of Alabama, the number 1 player from the state of Ohio, the number 1 player in Florida. And, you know, I think it's funny that people got really upset. People got really upset when Chris Marler made the point of there's not a ton of talent in the state of South Carolina. Like, it's not a talent-rich state. Do people think that's a hot take? I mean, I think Chris nailed it. You know, I think every year there's going to be 3 or 4 guys you pick out of the state that you'd like to get, but, like, to win big at South Carolina, you have to go out of state. Like, you don't have a choice. This is not a Georgia situation where we could pick the top 20 guys out of the state, out of Atlanta, and we're good to go. Or we can just recruit in the state of Florida and, you know, we're the Gators and we're good to go. Like, South Carolina does not produce talent at that level. It just doesn't. And that's okay, but it doesn't. To insinuate it does is just wrong. It did when Steve Spurrier was there. That's why that run was so unprecedented. Like, we have never seen that type of talent come out of the state of South Carolina. But to win big at Carolina, you have to get out of the state. And I'll say this about Will Muschamp. People used to tout that for him as well. Muschamp, and then they recruit so well in the state. Well, let's call it for what it is. One of the reasons they recruited so well in the state is because Clemson didn't have to recruit in state. Clemson was going nationally and getting big-time guys from other states. And so Carolina was landing some of these in-state guys that were 4 stars, whatever. But, I mean, you know, one of those guys they landed was Luke Doty. He ain't played a lick in 2 years. Won't play this year either. I mean, it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, so. And again, Austin Gregory, to your point, we aren't a talent-rich state. Not a hot take, but hey, I will say as lately we've been producing some stud guys. That's the big thing, Austin. You can't lean solely on the state of South Carolina in recruiting, but you better land those big-time guys. Like, you better keep them home, right? Like, keep those guys. And if there's any 3-star guys like a Nicky Mawari, diamonds in the rough type of dudes, keep them home. You don't want to lose them, but if it ever came to a point where South Carolina was like, you know what, we're going to take this guy from Texas over this guy from South Carolina because he's just a better player, that wouldn't hurt my feelings because I don't care where you're from. We just want to win games. So, anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Yeah, Austin, you hit the nail on the head. getting back into the state of North Carolina and winning big. That's why Paylor's impact is underrated. His recruiting trail impact is just as big, if not bigger, than his infield impact would be. I mean, yeah, you heard J.C. Sherbert, guys, talk about it earlier in the week. And this is, by the way, the fact we're talking recruiting right now, the irony of it. This is the start of a huge recruiting weekend for South Carolina. Huge. Huge. Absolutely huge weekend for the Gamecocks. I would fully expect a welcome home or two to come down. And I'm not saying that because I've got some intel, some inside. This guy told me he's committing. Bro, you have all those prospects on campus. I think it'd be a failure if you didn't get a welcome home. At least one. At least one. Right? So, huge recruiting weekend this weekend, man. I mean, absolutely huge. Austin Gregory says, we got Elijah Griffin at the cookout, number 1 overall recruit in 25, according to 24/7 Sports Composites. That's big, Austin. That's very big. Brewer Nation, most of these kids are 2025 and 2026. Brewer Nation, is Dylan Stewart not on campus this weekend? I mean, that's the big one I'm thinking about. Is Daniel Hill not on campus? And hey, since we're talking about it, I mean, this opens up the convo. How are y'all feeling about recruiting right now with South Carolina? I'm surprised more people didn't get upset when I made the very honest assessment about the running back room. Swing and a miss. I mean, not getting Dylan Stewart would probably fall in that category as well. I mean, the Gamecocks in the midst of some battles right now, man. They're in the midst of some battles. And you trust Shane Beamer. They're going to recruit well. They're going to get the guys they need. But, man, I mean, you talk about the way they've lost some momentum in recruiting, and you look at the team rankings and where they sit right now. Gamecocks need some good news on the recruiting trail badly. I mean, just badly, dude. Okay, so Hill is not coming. So, I mean, is it safe to say Hill is going to Alabama? Is that the general consensus, Brewer Nation? That Daniel Hill is going to Bama? Because he's going to Bama's cookout, right? He is going to Bama's cookout, I'd assume, correct? And Paylor, it sounds like he's also going to NC State. I mean, again, listen, you know this, y'all know this. I'm not a I'm not a recruiting diehard like some others. I'd much rather just talk ball on the field, give opinions, give takes, give predictions, all that good stuff. But I mean, right now, guys, you look at the rankings. In the 24/7 Sports Composite, guys, do you realize South Carolina has fallen all the way to 25th? 25th in the team rankings. Now, I understand everyone above them has more commitments. They've only got 13 of them. South Carolina's average rating is a 90.66. That ranks higher than literally everyone above them until you get to 15th ranked Oklahoma, who's at a 90.88. FSU's at a 90.56. Oregon's at a 90.54. LSU's at a 90.5. They're at 11th. Notre Dame, who's 7th, at a 90.61. So the average ranking of the prospect you have committed is pretty damn good. But right now, you are 25th in the team rankings, and you are 10th in the SEC rankings. Austin Gregory, not safe to say Hill's not coming. A sign he goes to Bama per JC. JC said it's a travel thing. His stance doesn't change with his absence. Okay. I remember JC did say, you're right, by the way, Austin Gregory, that it was like cross-country. He's got a long drive. We'll put it that way. Georgia, of course, number 1. Dude, how about the Florida Gators being ranked 3rd in recruiting right now? I mean, guys, again, you can say what you want about Billy Napier. They're recruiting their asses off. They are recruiting their tails off in Gainesville. Clemson at 8th, Tennessee at 9th. Arthur Bear says, considering how many times Dylan Stewart has visited, 10 times, I believe we should feel good about him. If he doesn't commit, sign, something went wrong. Yeah, and Arthur Bear, if he doesn't commit, I think it's NIL. I think Stewart is definitely a guy that NIL is going to play a factor. I mean, I think you have to believe that NIL would have some sort of impact if he did not commit. Just my 2 cents, just my take. Let's see. Austin Gregory, how about Auburn flipping one of Georgia's 5 stars? Dude, Hugh Freeze is going to win at Auburn. There ain't no question. That man can recruit. He can, to steal a Will Muschampism, he can sell ice to an Eskimo. Jacob E. says, I truly believe if we changed apparel providers, we would be looked at better. Do you think Under Armour is the reason South Carolina football is not recruiting at a higher level? Anybody agree with that? I mean, listen, I would love to have Nike, Jordan. I'm not a huge Under Armour guy. I don't hate it necessarily, but let's see. Again, need some welcome homes, guys. Need some welcome homes. Need some welcome homes. Jacob E. says, only one team has ever made the college football playoff with Under Armour. Just a fact is all. I mean, Jacob E., listen, you make a good point. You make a good point. I'm not saying that point's invalid. I'm not saying that point's invalid. I wish South Carolina would go with a different apparel provider. I really do. I'll tell you this, guys. Making lists is a great way to get engagement on Twitter. Mike Farrell dropped his top quarterbacks entering 2023. He's got Spencer Rattler 35th in college football. He's got Carson Beck 22nd, Cade Klubnik 21st. He is admittedly, and I think he even put out some list where, like, I think he's very down on Rattler. I don't think he believes in Rattler. He is a Spencer Rattler doubter, to say the least. But Cade Klubnik's 21st, Rattler's 35th. But the tweet has 211,000 views, so I think it probably accomplished what he was hoping for, which is tons of engagement. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Unknown call from
Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer.
Robbie, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It rained a little bit over here where I'm at, but I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic as well, my friend. Just trying to stay cool. It's a scorcher out there, but just enjoying it, man. Enjoying it.
Yeah, and I'm convinced over my 32 years of life, okay, that South Carolinians are bipolar. Like I've said before, they're bipolar when it comes to weather. Okay, it's been a furnace all summer, and then hopefully in August it starts getting a little cooler. But whenever it gets cold, we're going to want it to be hot. So, I mean, it's crazy how in South Carolina the weather just jumps all over the place. So I usually tell people that South Carolina is bipolar when it comes to weather. It doesn't know what it wants to do.
That is true, Robbie.
I was only outside for. I was only outside for like. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was thinking this morning, man, when I was standing outside and it's scorching hot in Greenville, and the weather is much more. Like, honestly, I'll say this: Greenville has the best weather of anywhere I've been in South Carolina. Like, it is the most manageable weather. It's the most bearable weather, if you will. Like, it doesn't get just balls hot like Columbia does. As hot as it is in Greenville, I'm like, I can't even fathom what it feels like in Columbia right now. Like, and listen, I got none but love for Cola, but there, that's one of the downsides of Cola. That weather in Columbia is brutal, bro. I mean, it's brutal. It is brutal.
It's a scorcher.
Yeah, it's a scorcher. Yeah.
Like, I was only outside for like not quite 5 minutes walking the dog yesterday morning, and I was sweating bullets. And I was only outside for like not even 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, and I was sweating bullets. I was like, yeah, I'm going to wait for you to just do number one, and then we're going inside, because I ain't standing outside for another 5 minutes waiting for you to do your other business. So as soon as the dog was done, we went right inside. I was like, I ain't doing it. Yep. It was nuts. But anyways, I'm gonna get to the nuts and bolts of the convo here. Like I said in the chat, right? I don't like, it doesn't matter who the running back is, okay? Like, we're gonna have to use probably everybody, right? Okay. But the running backs cannot do anything if the offensive line does not show up. And all the offensive line really needs to do is just block long enough for us to get positive yardage. That's all you got to do. Blocking somebody is not that difficult. All you got to do is just block them long enough for us to get 5, 4, 3. I don't care. Just get positive yards every single run play. That's all you got to do. Block long enough for us to get positive yards. That's all you got to do. In my opinion, an offensive lineman has the easiest job, sort of, because all they have to do is block.
Robbie, when you say it like that, man, it's when you say it like that, it's very simple. I mean, it's just, hey, we need you to give a speech to the offensive line. That's what we need.
Just block long enough for us to move the ball. That's all you got to do. I mean, think about what a wide receiver has to do. He not only has to run the route, but he's also got to worry about a defensive back and catching the football. But a lineman, on the other hand, all you got to do is worry about blocking. Block long enough for the quarterback to look down the field. All he needs is maybe 3.5 seconds to look down the field. You give a quarterback like Spencer Rattler that much time to look downfield, we're going to move that dadgum football. I can guarantee you with that. We might not get much time when we play Georgia and Athens, but as far as the rest of the schedule goes, if you give in any other game, you give Spencer Rattler 3.5 seconds to look down the field, we're going to move that daggum ball.
Robbie, I hope the offensive line makes it look as simple as you're making it sound right now. That's all I'm saying. I hope that the O-line can make it look that easy.
And Beamer, if you're listening, if you need me to give a pregame speech, I'll be at every single home game, not counting the season opener, if you need me to give a pregame speech. I'll do it. I don't care. I'll do it.
Do it for free.
You ain't even got to pay me. I'll do it for free. I'm already going to be at the game anyhow.
I love it, Robbie. If it happens, all I ask is you get it on video. That's all I ask, my man. That's all I ask. Just get it on video.
Oh God. Well, I'll try if it ever happens.
Robbie, I mean, all we have to do is just win every game. It's that easy. It's that simple. Just win every game and go to the national title and win that one, and there you go. I mean, I don't know why we just don't do it.
Dude, Yeah. I mean, this whole like, and honestly, part of me kind of does. I don't believe that the reason, like you said before I called, I believe the reason why we don't do well, it's not because we're signed with Under Armour, okay? That's not why. You're outside of your dang mind if you think that's the reason why our football team's trash. Okay? I don't care who we're signed with. I don't care. I just want us to win football games, okay? I don't care. I don't care if we're signed with Under Armour. I don't care if we're signed with Jordan. I don't care if we're signed with Nike. I don't care if we're signed with Adidas. I don't care. I just want us to win football games and live long enough to just win a national title in football. If God allows that to happen, He can take me home afterwards. I don't care.
Indeed, my guy. No, that's a great point. It's a great point. So we'll see, Robbie. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a lot of fun for sure. Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer. Robbie, go ahead. What you got?
Yeah. Last thing, and then I'm going to get off of here, I promise.
Yeah.
It might change between now and when I give you my game-by-game prediction, but if I had to give you a score right now when the season started tomorrow, I would pick us to win against UNC in Charlotte 31-17 right now.
Wow. 31-17 would be your pick. Okay.
Yeah. 31-17 would be my pick right now if the season was to start tomorrow. But it might change between now and a couple of weeks from now whenever I give you my game-by-game prediction.
Okay. I can't wait for that, Robbie. Truly. I love predictions. You know that.
But I'll have it ready for you in a couple of weeks, I promise.
Sounds good, Robbie. Hey, man, I appreciate you. Always a pleasure. Yeah, have a great weekend, my guy. Always a pleasure to hear from you.
Thanks. You too. Yeah.
Get in. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Robbie Davis, the Zaxby's Hall of Famer, an expert on Zaxby's, not an expert on playing offensive line. That goes without saying. Oh, my God. I love Robbie to death, but, man, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. Jacob B says, this is such a swing and miss take that Robbie threw his back out. Yeah, I hear you. Oh, well, we love Robbie. We love Robbie either way. Guys, we're going to jump into one final break. On the other side, we'll close out the show in style. We'll take your questions, your comments, your calls, and more. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie Ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back. Final 7 minutes or so here in the Daily Crow as we close out this week, guys. And again, let me say thank y'all so much. The content has been absolutely rolling this week. Truly, whether it be social media, the podcast, the live show, of course, and everything in between. So again, thank y'all so much. Let's jump right back into it. Luke Kennedy says, what is the goal this year with a run defense, you would say, this year? What's a realistic average yards per game allowed this year? Luke, I mentioned this when we talked defense. And while this might sound like a low expectation, I think just taking baby steps. I don't think it's realistic to say that, okay, well, South Carolina was 13th in the SEC in rush defense, and this year they need to finish in the top half. Like that's a huge step. If South Carolina can finish, and they were 116th nationally, by the way, in rush defense. If this group can finish inside of the top 100, if this group can finish inside of the top 11 for the first time in 5 years, or 6 years, really, 5 consecutive seasons, they finished 11th or worse. If you could finish 10th or better and 100th or better nationally, I think that's a success. I think that is a great step forward, and I think that's a great building block type of year in year one of Travion Robertson. In regards to yards per game, you gave up 198 yards per game last year. I mean, it's got to get better than that. I think floating around the 165 to 170 range would be a great improvement. I really do. I really do. Austin Gregory, all you got to do is stop taking so many breaks, Chris. It's that simple. Well, Austin, starting Monday, I mean, the breaks are already necessary because 3 hours nonstop, Austin, is a lot. But we'll be running a new ad in our break beginning next week. Carolina Cigars, of course, they join us as a business partner, jumping on beginning in August and throughout the football season. Really excited. They jumped on middle of last season, I would say, even like really the last third of the season is when Carolina Cigars became like a prominent partner with us. I'm so excited, so thrilled that they are going to be a business partner from the jump of this 2023 football season. So, guys, really, really excited for that. You'll see the ad. You'll hear the ad, read all that good stuff starting next week in our breaks on the Daily Crow. Let's see. Austin says less than 180 yards per game will be good for 100th or better nationally. Top 50 is less than 150 yards per game. Yeah. I mean, if you're at that 170 yard per game mark, Austin, like I mentioned, that's a great year. Austin says, smoke them if you got them. Yeah. Go get your Tar Heel packs right now. Austin says, can't wait to burn that Tar Heel pack. Yeah, I can't wait either. Cannot wait either. That'll be fun too, Austin, lighting the pack in the post-game call-in show after we win. That'll be like, we'll probably light it right here. We have not smoked a studio stogie yet. We'll have the fan going out the window so that we can do so. There won't be many stogies smoked in the studio. I mean, it'll have to be really special occasion. So I don't even know if after UNC I'll smoke one like in here. I don't know. I might have to save that for a bigger dub, but that'll be a lot of fun. Guys, if you have not done so, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Drops every single day, 5 p.m. Eastern. Daily podcast dropping, of course, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show, by the way. Leave us 5 stars. Leave us feedback. Whatever you like, don't like about the show. Let us know. John Edward, I'm currently writing the Gamecock football roster. Just got to write what year In college, they are. So, John Edward, you're writing out the entire roster. Okay. Austin Gregory, Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson are studio Stogie worthy. Yes, I would agree with that 110%, Austin. 110%. Yes, yes, Lynn, there will be less ad break music. Yes, much less. Much less ad break music, Lynn. It won't be the entire, or it won't, the Carolina Cigars ad read obviously is not going to take up the entire 5-minute break. But, yeah. John Edward doing it by positions. Okay. Very good. It is fun to give the, the breakdowns, if you will, and just kind of give you an idea who's on the roster, who's not, whatever. So, I mean, next week, guys, what we'll probably do is, because the way we're doing these position unit previews right now, is Tuesday, Thursday. So, like, next week, I think the next one is wide receiver. We'll talk that Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll talk O-line Thursday, Friday. Monday, we'll probably devote a lot of that show. Of course, we'll have our Kentucky opponent preview. We'll probably devote a lot of that show to our fall camp preview. Storylines, expectations, things we most want to see, stuff like that. Just a fall camp preview as fall camp will get going on Friday. Spider-Man 3001, Chris, are there any other Gamecock creators that are any good? Yeah, there's plenty. There's tons. Whether it be podcast, graphics, traditional media, new media, video, social media, whatever it might be. I mean, there's plenty. There's plenty out there, man. I've said it many, many times, Spider-Man, and I'll say it yet again. Maybe this is the case. I'm not quite as familiar with these other fan bases, but I doubt there's a fan base out there that is blessed with the fact that there are so many options to choose from in regards to, again, podcasts, graphics, social media, folks that do it full-time, some of the time, part-time, barely any of the time. But, like, there's just so many options in regards to content, styles of content, so many great options. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of great content creators out there, for sure. For sure. Anyways, guys, we're going to go ahead and close it out. We've hit 3 o'clock and appreciate you all tuning in. Hope y'all have a fantastic weekend. Thank you all so much again for the love, the support. What a great week it was. And again, like I mentioned, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And, yeah, Aaron Freeman, finally. Record prediction going into 2023. You already know it, Aaron. 7-5. I've locked it in. 4-4 in SEC play, guys. That being said, I'm out of here. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you all on Monday.